Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How's it going, guys? We've got Yusuf today, mashallah. How are you doing, bro? Welcome.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah Khair for having me.
Has everyone got their cup of tea ready for a lovely chat?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
My piece is on its way.
Pieces on the. It's not the ration chat. Oh, actually, it's not the ration challenge anymore. But alhamdulillah. So, guys, we're talking about the live stream that was on Hamza's Den yesterday. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's right.
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Right. Who wants to kick off a little summary of what happened?
Oh, okay. So basically, what happened yesterday, was it yesterday, Friday? Sorry, we did a live stream, mashallah, on my other channel, Hamza's Den, and then what we did, we introduced some arguments that atheists present to theists when trying to speak about Creator and such. And we've had a lot of atheists responding. I mean, there's been a lot of atheists in my chat, and I don't know what they're responding to. We've had reaction videos made about it. Again, indicating that apparently we don't know how atheists think. We've made them into one conglomerate. But what we were doing, we were presenting challenging arguments that we do get atheists come at us with. So the idea of proving your God, the suffering in the world, and evolution and things like that. So what I thought would be fantastic would be for us to analyze what went on. And we got a philosopher in the house, in Brother Yusuf, mashallah, to help us understand, because they were coming with so much philosophy. I mean, I've got a page full of flipping crazy atheist philosophers at the moment, asking me all sorts. So inshallah, this will break that down. So yeah, alhamdulillah, Abbas was dying to jump on the last stream. Unfortunately, I didn't see his message. Sorry, my brother. Jordan's going to give us his straightforward reactions. Obviously, Imran is going to give us his breakdown. And alhamdulillah, let's go for it, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So,
where do you want to begin?
Abbas and Jordan, you weren't there on the actual stream, but what did you think watching the stream? What was your kind of...
Can I mention one thing before, Abbas? You go first, but can I mention, because obviously we're talking about atheists. I mean, I think you made it clear at the start that you're not talking about the normal geezer in the street that maybe don't really care. You were talking about sort of this new atheist group. And I thought Tom, who came on, Tom Jump, the way he was defending Darwin and almost taking whatever he said, even though it was clearly pointed in front of him, that
Dawkins.
actually almost do it. Sorry, Dawkins. Yeah, sorry, Dawkins. Even though he was shown, various times on video, you saw him kind of do what they accuse theists of doing, defending our religion regardless. He was doing the same for Dawkins, which I thought was extraordinary. So I think that was proof to me that we are actually talking about one set of people in that fact.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was a very good stream. I mean, I suppose what really sort of stood out for me is that whenever we talk about the cause of the universe, and I think you obviously did touch on that quite a lot during the stream, whenever you sort of start discussing possibilities, rational possibilities of how the universe came into existence, often, certain theories are sort of, brought into the arena. And as soon as you start challenging those theories, they say, oh, what we don't know, almost to sort of stop the discussion and turn it to the theist and say, well, prove to me that there's a creator. And I think it's unfair. And I'll just very briefly sort of explain why it's unfair. Because really, rationally, there are only two possibilities. There is a material cause to the universe, or it wasn't caused, it was always there, which still means it was just material, or there's a supernatural cause to the universe. Now, if there's a material cause through induction or deduction, however you want to put it, there's a certain premise that you can set up as to how it could have come into existence. So it either had a material cause, it either always existed, it came into existence by itself, came into existence because of another material cause. And if you analyze those individual sort of points, and these are the sort of things that always come up. And I know, Hamza, you've discussed, the beginning of the universe, even with scientists who've showed up, the guy with the big hair who showed up at Speaker's Corner, me and Imran and you, Hamza, we've had lots of discussions with Skydive Phil, who's very well versed with with science. He certainly knows a hell of a lot more than me. And these are the models that always come up. And yet, if you look at these models, there are huge holes in these models. And I think anyone who relies on these models has to be believing something. And I use the word believe without evidence. Because if you look at, for example, always existed, well, either you believe in a static model, which, as far as I know, no scientist really, or hardly anyone accepts that, or you believe in this cyclic universe, where it just simply always was, and it simply goes back to itself, and it's happened infinitely in that way, with no beginning, but it still requires an explanation. Where does all this matter, energy, and everything else originate from? Where does it come from? It always existed is a faith-based reasoning, quite frankly, because there's no material, analytical, or empirical evidence to support that claim. So then you're left with, came into existence by itself, which in itself is illogical, because I think intuitively nothing produces nothing, if we're truly talking about nothingness, right? Came into existence by a material cause. Well, then that material cause needs an explanation. And if you have another material cause and another material cause, clearly you go into the infinite regress, which is a complete nonsense of the entire thing. Because as you've pointed out, Hamza, as Imran has pointed out, if you have an infinite past, you can't get to the present. There is no universe, because you'd be infinitely simply going back in time. There is no going forward. And that's the sort of fallacy, of the infinite regression. Now, what the atheist does is he says, oh, but we're not making any claims. You're making the claim about theism, about God. So you need to provide the evidence. But that's not true. They are making a claim. And their claim is that the universe came into existence without this creation or creator who brought it into existence. That is a claim. And so they have to provide evidence of how a universe comes into existence by itself, or one of the other models that have existed. Now, the fact that they have to rely on one of these models means that it's a faith-based religious belief, basically, because there's no evidence to support those views, right? No analytical or empirical evidence, in fact. And so when they ask, and I remember, Hamza, you discussing at the park, there are two ways of finding truth. One is to prove the truth itself. The other is to look at what the alternatives are and disprove those. And if you end up disproving the alternatives, then as Sherlock Holmes says, Hamza, and I think you've mentioned that many times before, that you are left with the only rational, reasonable, and I say reasonable possibility.
Yeah. Well, the answer is however, how improbable.
Right.
So when you eliminate the impossible, whatever's left, no matter how improbable, has to be the truth. So
that's the point.
That's the gist of it. But what I find amazing about atheists, to be honest with you, they're proud, so proud, saying, we say we don't know. We simply say we don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. And I agree. Now, I agree, yeah. If you say you don't know, you don't know. But when I say, well, I believe this, and you say you're wrong, then you go, whoa, wait a minute, you don't know. So you've just said you don't know, and now you're telling me I'm wrong about something you don't know about. And this is the inconsistency for me. This is what you lose me at that point. That's when I realize you're insincere, because if you don't know something, then be quiet about it. If I can have an opinion about it, you could say, well, I don't believe that's true. You can't say it's not true, because you don't know, as you've just admitted. And I don't think it realize that. Even as we had don't know of the gaps. You remember? Don't know. Our mate Skydive Phil again. Don't know. All right, that's fine. Then don't challenge my opinion then, as if you know, because you don't. So that's what I find really ironic, to be honest.
There's also the weird thing of how, like, you'll talk about atheism and they'll say, oh, well, it's just the lack of belief. There's no proposition being put forward in atheism. And so, well, what do you refer to the people who do put propositions forward as? What is the name for the person who says, I believe that there is no God? Are they atheists? And like, if they are, then it's not simply this idea of the lack of proposition. And it feels like they've sort of changed the definition so that they can still call themselves atheists. Whereas back in the day, it was, when you spoke of atheists, you would think about the positive claim and not just this lack of belief. And the lack of belief was always referred to as agnosticism. But now they're like, no, agnosticism is sort of synonymous with atheism. So, well, why are we using these different terms? It's and then if you being an atheist is synonymous with you being agnostic, i.e. that you're just simply saying you don't know. So what's the name for the people who say they know God doesn't exist? That they feel it as a certainty, or like how do we deal with that? That's always weirded me out. It's just an observation.
Yeah, the stream to me. Go on, Hamza.
No, go on.
The stream to me highlighted, especially when I heard that Tom speak, is that, obviously Abbas, put forward some very clear-cut explanations there, but they're almost, it's like when you speak to a Quranist, they've actually got all their bases covered now. So, you're talking about infinite regression, they'll bring up the multiverse, or you bring up whatever you've got. There's kind of a list of arguments. Even if you bring up nothing, something from nothing, they've got Lawrence Krauss was given 3 reasons as to how even describing nothing means that nothing exists, and all this kind of wordplay. What I found from the stream, especially listening to Tom, is that it's actually, I don't know about you guys, it's moved on to another level where they've kind of created so many different arguments now that I almost feel like you have to kind of know them all now to actually. But to be honest, they're all. It didn't feel fruitful to me. Tom was even got to the point where he was telling you that he knew how a phone worked. And he wouldn't use a phone. So I'm thinking, so what? If the guy's got some washing to do, unless he knows how the washing machine works, he ain't going to put the clothes in. And to that extent, he was kind of. I find him an interesting character. Clearly, someone who's hours and hours research to literally answer any question, like a tricky opponent almost. But I didn't really get the sense that he really believed in anything, and I found that was really interesting.
He lost me when he said that he doesn't go to the doctors because he doesn't trust the doctors. When I asked him that thing, you just as a doctor give you medicine, and he said, "No, I don't." Really
well, would you trust Imran?
Someone says that, I'm like, "Oh my god, this guy's hyper skeptic, man."
Would you trust
He'll be
Imran?
that guy in the cockpits asking the pilot, "Have you qualified before we go on our holiday to?"
Do you want to explain to me why I need to put my seatbelt on? Why do we need to put this?
Knocking on the door.
How do you need to know how something operates to trust to use it? Like you said, the mobile phone. We're just told how it is, and we believe it, and we just get on with it. I don't need to know the intricate details, but he seemed to know. Yeah, I know how it works. And he's like,
it's interesting as well.
Quantum mechanics or something. 3 versions of quantum mechanics throughout the mobile phone. I'm like, but then how is that a standard for everybody else who hasn't gone into that detail?
It was a very vague answer as well. So he said, he just kind of threw quantum mechanics out there. It was just like, so if I gave you all of the ingredients in just dust form, and all the machinery that you needed, could you make a phone independently? And if you can you really say you truly understand how a phone works? Or anything in general, because it is an understanding of something, not necessarily a complete understanding. Do you really can you get away with saying I understand how a phone works just by having a very general idea of the fact that it somehow involves quantum mechanics and that there's these gates that open and close or whatever? Is that worthy of being referred to as someone who knows how X works?
Yeah.
Because you know how to describe a part of X and not in its totality.
Yeah. What I found really amazing when I said to the 3 atheists, if God proved himself to you, appeared to you, the thing you crave, the evidence, the empirical observable evidence, would you follow what God says? No.
It's mental. That really got me as well. Because
he was like, what?
Yeah. It's because then they're anti-theists. It's not just atheists; they're anti-theists. And it's this emotional narrative in the the neo-atheist culture of the theist God being such a bad guy.
Yeah, I've done. I won't go on it with this stream, but I did some research. I know. I think Imran, you saw my stream where it was sort of to do with perhaps because they look at theists and say that they need God. Whereas I think when you twist it round, their resentment to God and what motivates them to continue, sort of continue debating for something they don't believe in, I've always found bizarre. Can I just want to say before I sort of my review of the streams, I think for me, I think, mashallah, I think all the brothers did well. I think for me, when I heard that Imran was going to do, you were going to try and do the problem of evil without Islam, I thought, whoa, how's that? Because obviously, I think for me explaining that, I would always need to explain about, God being all wise, and but mashallah, you did a great job in taking evil off them, and obviously, obviously, just asking that question presupposes a God. But I thought the analogies you gave and everything were, I thought they were spot on, and definitely very good.
I was worried that we were going to stray into religion because we wanted to keep the stream completely off religion. And I was thinking, Imran, how are you going to do that? How are you going to say limited time on earth and forever in paradise? You're not going to be able to do that without bringing religion into it. And you smashed it, bro. Right. The reason I put this statement on, so this is the live stream where you guys misrepresent what T-Jump said, right? This guy's been all over my comment section on the stream.
I want to know what he thinks has been misrepresented already, because we've not really said
this is your opportunity. This is his opportunity to come onto this stream when we put the link out and explain yourself, because he's been in my comment section all morning. So I'd love to see if he's brave enough to jump on and explain.
Yeah, I'd love to see him disagree with obviously what we said about Dawkins, because Sabor and yourself showed him the video about 4 times, and it took him a while to actually admit anything. He was kind of, I've never seen anyone dance around anything like that.
Yeah, it was really weird. I pulled up the quote here again as well, just to kind of like put an emphasis on something I think really wasn't honed in on. So he says, but if your aim is to kill religion, and then he emphasizes as mine is, and then he gets that massive like round of applause and you go Dawkins, you legend, and then everyone proper buzzes off him, and then he says, then so he's linking what follows that to that very statement. So like his aim is to kill religion. So he makes that very clear in that video. And then he says, and then since evolution is manifestly true, if there are people out there who really believe that, if you are an evolutionist, you've got to be an atheist. And all I've got to do is persuade them of evolution. So he was making it very clear that
I'm going to fool the people.
He was persuading them of evolution for the goal of killing religion, and admitting that, doing that with the inference based on the fact that evolution somehow is necessarily connected to atheism. He said at the beginning, as like Imran pointed out again, and I'm sure Sabor like kind of reined it in a few more times. The very first statement was that there's no necessary connection between evolution and atheism. So he's admitting that there's no necessary connection. Then he's admitting that his aim, his purpose in life, like his telos, is to destroy religion, and then he's happy and willing to completely neglect the false inference for the purpose of simply making them atheist, and that is dishonest. That's and then he said, "Oh, what was the quote? I've got it here. Do you think it's dishonest to teach people facts?" But that's not the only thing we're pointing out here. It's not just a case of teaching someone facts. It's doing so and knowing that the presence of a particular fact will lead them to make a false inference, and then not pulling them up on it, just neglecting that completely, and being aware of the fact that they've made a false inference, and then just stepping away because, khalas, I've got my goal is to destroy religion. From the statement itself, it makes it very clear that he's not bothered about whether or not it's through genuine inferences or false inferences. And he's not going to bother correcting the person or going, "Oh, by the way, you might believe in evolution now, but that doesn't necessarily entail atheism." If all he had to do was throw that in, and then maybe T-Jump would have had a genuine foot to stand on. But he was, for whatever reason, trying to kind of rein it in on this idea that Dawkins has no responsibility over their ignorance. But if he's trying to lead them down a particular path and knows that it's a false inference that's going to take them to that conclusion, i.e. atheism, then he has a responsibility, because he's the one holding their hand and guiding them through it. And if you are trying to be honest, you would put forward that point. By the way, evolution doesn't necessarily.
To be fair, Tom never said. Sorry, is it T-Jump? Is that T-Jump? Tom Jump. He never made the claim that evolution disproves God. But I think I remember what happened is I think Sabor brought that argument, or Hamza, and he came on, and the typical atheist kind of response is, well, we don't all believe that. So it's a way of kind of dodging, but I think Sabor made it clear that, that this argument is out there, whereas he came on and said, no one claims that. And that's quite a common recurrence as well that I see amongst the atheist sort of debaters, is because obviously in Islam, there's things that we're held to, but an atheist can sort of duck and dive. Oh, we don't believe that part. They can kind of select things in a debate.
Yeah, because they're not held to a standard. Yeah.
And it's a bit annoying as well, because later on when he brought up the Phil paper survey, he started saying we believe X, or philosophers believe X, Y, Z. But the thing is I checked the paper out. There was 931 participants of the paper. Hopefully this is the same paper he was talking about, but it's a survey on Phil. I can pull it up actually. I've got it here. I did have it. Yeah, so I'll post a link. I don't know if I kind of
How many screens have you got there, Yusuf? You're like looking over there, looking over there, looking over here. You're covered with screens. In your
He's like Tom Cruise in Minority Report. Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've got two screens, but
I think they're just mirrors.
Yeah. But
checking the angles.
Rather than me posting the link, because I'm going to have to open up something else.
I think one very quick point, Yusuf, just to say about Dawkins, is that I don't think he fails to correct people. I think he deliberately guides them, knowing what's happening. It's orchestrated. And I think that is what makes it inherently dishonest. It's like trickery. It's like tricking somebody into atheism by a very well thought out strategy. Because he's admitted that atheism doesn't disprove the existence of a creator, but it works. So I use
evolution, not atheism.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Evolution. Because it works, I use it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's inherently dishonest. I mean, you're actually tricking people into your position. And as an academic, I mean, that's atrocious, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
The thing about this point, actually, because it went on for a little bit of time, is that it's clear to everyone. Everyone can see the point that Dawkins is using somebody's misunderstanding of science connected to evolution, so atheism connected to evolution, as a way to get religion off them. And he's not correcting their misunderstanding of this connection between evolution and atheism, but instead he's just trying to use that as the tool to get religion away from them, which is a trick. But he didn't seem to get it.
Yeah. And what I find really ironic is that other atheists come on saying, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. I'm thinking, well, Dawkins does it. And so many atheists I've spoken to say, science proves evolution, therefore your God doesn't exist. And you're like, well, and then as soon as you go to an atheist and say, you do know that, evolution doesn't disprove God. Yeah, of course, we do know that. We do know that. And yet you lay atheist, they all believe it. So I think one of the brilliant things that came out of that stream was that 3 of their representatives who came on all admitted that proving evolution doesn't disprove a creator. And I think that was something that needed to be, that myth needed busting. And I think that if there was one thing that came out of it, it was that. 100%, alhamdulillah.
There's also the issue of, when obviously at the beginning, I felt like you made it quite clear that you weren't talking about every single atheist. And obviously because you shouldn't be generalizing here, and they're quite a free-floating, quote-unquote, people. So it's difficult to pin them on absolutely anything, because they vary very much in a lot of the things that they come out with. But this also means they can't say we don't say that, because that's also a generalization. So they can't say we as atheists don't make the claim X, Y, Z, because now you're forcing your position upon everyone who declares themselves atheist, despite complaining about the fact that the atheists are constantly generalized, blah 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 blah. It's like, well, now you're generalizing atheists yourself by making the claim that we as atheists don't do this, when there is examples of it doing it, and simply pointing out that we have an experience when talking to atheists, because they are atheists when people do put these things out. And they claim to be, they say they don't, they don't believe in God, blah 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 blah, and then they make another claim. When we point out the fact that an atheist says this, and we're trying to figure out or discuss how we would respond to that, you're not adding anything to the conversation by simply saying, "Oh, we don't say that." No, we're not saying every atheist does. We're saying with this guy here, that guy there, they declare themselves to be atheists, and they've put forward this argument, and now we're dealing with it.
I think that I'm just going to say that's the nature of this type of stream that Hamza did. What he was doing was, we're just going to answer the claims and questions that commonly occur when talking to an atheist, because that's the thing. When atheists, different atheists have different philosophies, and you see that with famous atheists as well. So yeah, we're going to say stuff. We're going to say, like, for example, the evolution thing. So evolution doesn't, there being evolution doesn't disprove there being a God, right? Some atheists will say that, and some won't. So we're like you guys were just addressing the things you guys come across at the park and through dialogue. It's just that's how it is, and that's what's the beauty of these live streams. Because some atheists will come on and bring another point, and then we'll address
Is it just me, or has Ben's voice suddenly become very husky?
I was going to mention that. It sounds deep, like he's slowed down.
Yeah, it's like we've got interjection.
I think
there's something extra in his coffee, guys.
But just to mention this comment here, he said, and Hamza can't say schooling atheists, but he can, because the claim isn't Hamza's schooling every atheist that's ever existed. Like, if you are schooling a number of atheists, you are schooling atheists. You know, it's not. Yeah, but it's not an absolute claim.
No, but the irony is this, right? If you watch that particular playlist of schooling atheists, you'll see that I'm not speaking to atheists, right? I'm speaking to theists and Muslims on how to respond and teach atheists that when they come with that abysmal claim, prove your God, provide evidence for your God, how to respond to it. And there's 10 TikTok videos in that playlist. And it's very simple. It's the belief flex. Yeah. So all I'm doing is teaching theists, when an atheist comes with that stupid claim, here's how you respond to it. That's all it is. So the idea, Hamza can't say schooling atheists, like you said, Yusuf. Of course I can. Because you can't say to me, atheists don't come up, who identify as atheists, don't say, prove your God. Or I'll come up and say, God doesn't exist. Or say, you believe in a sky daddy. You might as well believe in the tooth fairy. You can't say they don't do that. So if you watch that full playlist, you're schooled atheists, standard.
Yeah, and it's just as valid if someone was to go and quote unquote school theists. Say, like, you've got an atheist and he's making videos. He's approached 5 or 10 theists who are maybe not that bright, and he schools them. It's not dishonest to say this atheist schooled a number of schooled theists. It's not a total claim. He's not saying he's schooled every theist out there. Yeah, he's saying he's schooled these ones that have put forward these particular arguments, and especially if the arguments that these particular theists are putting out are terrible arguments, and he's pointing out why they're terrible, and he's giving his reasons X, Y, Z. We wouldn't make the claim that the atheist couldn't title his video like that. He can, because it's not an absolute claim. He's not put in the claim that it's all theists. It's a general statement.
The title of the video has no impact on the arguments being made.
Yeah,
and the fact that he's worried about the title is a red herring in itself. Why don't you talk about the arguments? Why don't you come on and talk about what was wrong with what was said and what was put forward? Because that's where the meat of the matter is.
Yeah. I've not heard anything about that yet. About the what I said on the belief. Alhamdulillah. There's one last thing I want to address from the stream, if you don't mind. And I think Yusuf has got a response to this as well. So I think we might be having a little mini debate. I'm not sure yet. About this idea that nature is a source of objective morality, right? Mm-hmm. So that Tijab's position was nature itself is the source of objective morality. So then when I kind of said, well, are you talking about just animal kingdom or human beings as well as part of nature? And he said, no, human beings as part of nature. So nature dictates what's moral. Yeah. So for example, when the lion kills the cubs of another male, are you saying that if you marry a woman and she's already got kids, it's moral to kill the kids because you want your kids to be brought up in that environment? Well, obviously, say no. Say, okay, so what happened to the morality of nature at this point? And then we spoke about, for example, how the eagle lands on the if it lands on the rabbit, it lands with its talons holding this rabbit down, and it's trying to get away the rabbit, and then it's plucking away at it, eating through its back.
I've got to say, man, the biggest thing for me was for me that was end time, when he believed he's immoral by eating meat, but he still does it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
brilliant.
That's why I asked
Brilliant.
you.
So what- so-
Vegetarian.
sorry, why should we listen to you on moral values or anything then?
No, but that wasn't the
so
point.
you believe it's you shouldn't eat meat, but yet you do it anyway,
No, but
and you
Ben,
call yourself immoral.
Ben, that's not the point. That's not the point. When I spoke about when he used nature as his objective morality standard, and then I said the eagle does this to the rabbit, and he says, "Well, that's wrong."
Yeah,
Wait
that
a
was the
minute, you're
weirdest.
telling the objective standard it's wrong. So what? So now your objectivity's out the window. No, you're
Did
applying
he accept,
your subjective standard onto an
But just to
And
kind of
also
link
to be
sorry,
fair,
Ben.
Ben, I mean, to be honest, and to be fair here, just because you do things that are immoral doesn't mean that you can't think that what you're
we
doing
say
is
that about
immoral.
Muslims,
Yeah,
don't we?
That doesn't defeat his argument, to be fair to him, because I don't want to misrepresent him either. But I did find it very unusual, Hamza, because you asked him, is it immoral for the eagle to do that to the rabbit, I believe? And he said, yes, it is.
Yes.
So,
But so nature's wrong.
You know, the funny thing here is that I think these type of arguments are quite absurd, because if you think that's immoral, then the consequences of that would be that the eagle would starve to death, possibly over many days, feeling a lot of pain and suffering, and its offsprings would die. So then would that be moral? And this is where the lack of knowledge comes in. I was watching a very interesting program about Yellowstone, and they reintroduced the wolves in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Did you see that, Hamza? It's
Another level.
absolutely other level, right?
It changed the course of the river.
It changes the course of the river. It altered the land. It altered the forests. It altered the wildlife. The other, insects and birds and all of these other things came, and they couldn't understand how that all happened just by introducing the wolves. And of course, what happened was, because the deer population were not being culled, they were overgrazing. And as a consequence, the rivers were sort of washing away the land, and the trees wouldn't grow, the bushes wouldn't grow, the birds wouldn't come, the insects. So it absolutely altered everything in that area just by introducing the wolves, you see. And so this is the arrogance of human beings, that they think that, oh, that's immoral, but they don't understand the wider context.
Yeah.
Of all the different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, this entire web, that is altered by the arrogant one decision of taking something away. It's just bonkers to me.
But even the specifics, forget the specifics, it's the idea that nature is a source of objective morality.
Yeah.
Yet when it does something that you think is immoral, you're telling nature you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to work out now, how can something be objective morality when a subjective opinion can say it's wrong? I'm struggling with that. I'm really struggling with that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I think Yusuf's got an answer.
Because
no, I was going to say, so there is an interesting connection between what Ben brought up. So it might not necessarily, quote unquote, like refute his argument, but it definitely highlights an issue that Brother Sabor was mentioning, that this morality is not binding. Like he can say, yeah, eating meat's immoral. He's like, I'll still eat meat anyway. So what is morality if it's not binding? If you can like just choose not to bother following it, like who cares? So that was an interesting point, which does follow from what Ben pointed out. This issue of it being binding. The other problem.
He does make a contradiction to that very same statement, the fact that it couldn't be binding, because he said that the morality was an emergent property and it was like gravity.
Yeah.
And gravity you can't resist. You can't go somewhere on the earth where you're not going to have the gravity affecting you. But at the same time, he's saying what you're saying, Yusuf, which is, you can choose not to do it.
Yeah, but this is the thing. So gravity, you can oppose it with extra force in a particular way. So like if you want, gravity says, you're going to be here on the floor. But if you can introduce certain forces in a particular way, you can leave Earth's floor and start flying about in the sky. And so that would suggest that if he sees morality as the same thing, then you could do a similar thing. All you need is a particular amount of force working in an opposing direction, and then you can overcome it. But then is this to suggest that it's you know, it's not wrong, because it's not wrong. You're not like doing anything wrong by flying in a, you know, in a plane, by opposing, by going against those forces with opposing forces. So I would be very interested to hear what he would say in terms of that. Like, so if morality is like a force like gravity, that is to say that this is wrong, like you go down on Earth if, you know, there's no plane or anything. Does that opposing force overcome it? And then there was the whole issue of Hamza kind of alluded to it at the beginning, not too long ago, about this idea of objective versus subjective morality and things like that. Now, I differed with the brothers insofar as I would say what he was describing you could still call it objective. And the reason is like you kind of equate this idea. I think I can't remember who it was that said it exactly, but someone says objective reality. When brother talks about objective, they seem to mean unchanging. So that they're saying, like, if X is immoral, it must always be immoral. But this is talking about morality in an absolutist sense, not necessarily objective. So what he's talking about, just because it includes change, it doesn't mean that it's subjective. Because that, when he was talking about it, he was making the claim that it was an emergent property. But that emergent property isn't based in a subject. That emergent property is something external to a mind, and, you know, according to their worldview, and it is occurring in nature. So it wouldn't make sense to refer to it as a subjective morality, because it doesn't.
Did he say that there was a consequence of not following that morality? Did he say anything about that?
He did mention at one point that nature isn't changing. I can't remember the exact context, but he kind of talked about the fact that we root our morality. Bear with me. We think that morality is objective and unchanging, and is grounded in nature, a necessary nature, just like you believe it's grounded in a necessary God. So it's unchanging because it's a part of the necessary nature that can't change. But then if it's an emergent property, he is admitting that under certain conditions, certain moral propositions would necessarily have to change.
But he's also saying it's wrong.
Yeah, well, that's what was confusing me a bit. So he was talking as if when you're making a moral claim, it's absolutely the case, no matter what, throughout the entirety of natural history, and that nature doesn't change, but nature does change. And not only that, even if he's trying to talk in some like very vague sense, like you can't even make the claim that because we haven't experienced something changing over the past however long we've been on Earth, which is like, you know, a fragment of the time compared to the entirety of the history of the universe, you can't make a claim that whatever we've noticed in that time to not have changed, that's necessarily absolute, because you're working here from inference. You're making the assumption that because things have been the way they have been, that they will always be that way, or that they always have been that way. But that's not necessarily the case at all. Like, you can't make that jump. You can't make that necessary absolute claim about the laws that we're putting forward. That they may vary over very long periods of time, but we can't recognize that without that observation.
Yusuf, am I right that you sorry, wait a minute, Yusuf, am I right to say that you quoted exactly what he said on the video for your note?
So I what he said, I writ down, and I kept pausing and rewinding. So when he said, we think that morality is objective and unchanging and is grounded in nature, a necessary nature, just like you believing it's grounded in a necessary God. So it's unchanging because it's a part of the necessary nature that can't change. That is verbatim. So I can.
But that whole statement self-contradictory, because nature, not only is it not changing, nature is change.
Yeah,
that's all it does, and that's the whole point. This is where we get from the inflation to the diversity of life that we have now. It's in a constant state of flux. So I don't understand this idea about it's a necessary nature, because we know it's not necessary, because everything is contingent upon something prior to it, in whatever sense you want to use the word prior. So the fact that there's a possibility that I could not have existed. There's a possibility, right? That means I am not necessary. There's a possibility that gravity was different or worked in a different way. That becomes automatically not necessary. Right down to the very fundamentals, they don't have to be the way they are, so because they're contingent upon something else, and so they automatically then they become changing and unnecessary or not necessary. Unnecessary is probably the wrong term. So I don't get this idea that doesn't change. The other thing is that if there is a property, like he said, it was gravity, and it can be overcome. Different creatures use different mechanisms to overcome gravity to a different extent. So all of their moralities, if we were all have individual ways of trying to battle this inherent emergent property of morality that comes from nature, then we'd all be at different levels of morality. And whatever we do, it would differ between us. But we would have to say that all of these different moralities would be equally valid.
Yeah, if it's going to be objective.
If it's going to be objective, because why? Whatever nature gives you, and despite your ability to overcome it, it's still going to be objective, whatever that means.
But also under that paradigm, if somebody were to rob a bank, let's say, and they got away with it, he might say, well, no, that's immoral because of X, Y, Z. But that person might say, well, I've just made like £1 million and I'm sitting in the Bahamas, and I don't care what you think. So I'm overriding that sense of morality that you have. What are the consequences for that individual, unless, of course, there is something else that person is going to be held to account by? Do you see my point? There doesn't seem to be even if you argue that, okay, nature is inherently, and even if you argue, for example, that morality within nature at that point is absolute, and as nature changes, that becomes the new paradigm, the new absolute, let's say, for argument's sake. But what's the consequence of somebody breaking those laws and just killing somebody or stealing from somebody? In that situation, that person can have a nice life on a yacht in the Bahamas or whatever, live a ripe old age of 80, 90 or 100, and then die. And then apparently under that situation, there doesn't seem to be any consequences for that individual.
Yeah,
so
it kind of reduces.
You need consequences to have the morality in the first place.
Well, I think that without consequences, you would find that very few people, or certainly quite a large number of people, would not be moral. I mean, there was if you remember, there was a blackout in New York City, and I think it went on for a day or a few hours, or certainly whatever. And what they found that the average person was looting supermarkets and stealing bread and stealing. And yet the middle and upper class people were pulling outside jewelers in Mercedes.
Yeah, you're right.
And they were smashing the windows and they were stealing the jewelry on the basis that they knew they could get away with it, because there was mass hysteria, mass mob mentality. And they knew under that umbrella of chaos, they could get away with things. And so what you will actually find is that unless those consequences are there, either man-made consequences, the law, the strong hand of the law, or there's something higher, many people will quite easily sort of negate that morality for a few days or a few weeks or a few hours just so they can benefit,
Yeah. But again, and it led us on to the next point, because I asked a very simple question, that if a creator exists, a theistic creator exists, would that creator know man better than himself? Would he know what would harm and what would benefit? And so maybe I used the word morality and it got latched onto. Now, then you get this idea of an evil God. Is it by someone called Stephen Law or something? That I've been bombarded with the Stephen Law flex.
It came from Descartes.
My question was very simple. Would this creator know what would benefit us? Whether or not he chose to tell us what would benefit us, would he know? Would it know at that point in time without religion and such? Would it know what would benefit us, what would harm us? And the answer is yes. So if we can connect to that creator and judge that standard of right and wrong or good and bad or benefit and harm on the one who created us, surely that's a rational thing to do. And again, it went back to the idea of to our eagle and rabbit. How can something be objective when you can tell it because you don't like the way the rabbit gets killed by the eagle, nature's wrong. Because surely at that point then, I don't keep repeating this, but it's got to sink in. I've got to get it. It's got to sink in, right? Surely at that point, nature can't be the objective standard, because surely an objective standard is you measure against it. And if you don't match that standard, then you're wrong. Yeah? Surely that's what an objective standard is. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah. If you are go on, Yusuf.
No, go on, you say, and then I'll.
If you are, I mean, because obviously the argument was obviously without religion. I mean, a deistic God, for instance, would just create and then perhaps not know what's best for you, would you say, and just sort of leave it? So I'm just wondering if then you're sort of going down the.
No, I believe a deistic God would still know, because he created you. Yeah. And a deistic God wouldn't tell you, though. That's the difference. A theistic
it's to do with the lack of communication.
Okay, so you're saying a creator would know. Yeah, okay.
They both know, both paradigms. One tells you, one doesn't. And then you can also argue, is he telling you the truth or not? But whether he knows or not is not a question to be questioned, I don't think, personally. If a theistic God exists or a deistic God exists, it would know the benefits and harms for its creation. What's good for it and what's bad for it.
The only thing you couldn't say necessarily about the deistic God is when we're talking about the language of good and evil, from a deistic framework, there isn't necessarily this concept of good and evil.
Yeah, I didn't say good or evil. I just said harm or benefit.
Yeah. But then harm or benefit to what scale?
To a human being. So if he does this thing to his body, or he does this particular action in his life, it could lead to some harmful consequence. Yeah. And if he does this beneficial thing and follows these beneficial guidance, then it will lead to positivity and good things in his life.
But we're not just talking, when we speak of morality, we're not just talking about the individual, though. We're talking about the society whole scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Like certain moral claims, that someone might find them quote unquote painful. Like some people really struggle fasting, for example. Yeah. And despite the fact that they're struggling, despite the fact that they're not enjoying it, it's still a moral law. It's still incumbent upon them to practice that. And the reason is but it's not necessarily they might not even necessarily see the benefits that they're incurring from it.
No, you don't have to in this paradigm. Just as a sister doesn't see the benefits in wearing hijab, for example. Yeah. We know that when we look at things that we can rationalize, like alcohol, drugs, gambling, and all these things, and we see the detriments in society from it. Now, the hijab might be a harder thing to see the benefits and harm from. But because it's come from the same source, the same standard, we know there must be good in it. There must be some guidance in it. Why are we praying 5 times a day? There must be something beneficial in it, because we believe the standard of where it's coming from. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Can I just quickly deal with those two comments that came up? One about burning in hell, and the other one about the wasp. Basically, I think people should worry less about making judgments about decisions that God has made, and worry more about first whether God exists or doesn't exist, and did God actually say those things or not? Now, you might not agree with them; they might not sit on your heart, and you might not be able to accept those things. But the issue here is, it's more important for you to first ascertain whether God exists and whether God said those things. Because if he did say those things and you can rationally arrive at a position that God exists, then God's given you the tools necessary to be able to escape that punishment. In fact, we argue from an Islamic point of view that atheism is an acquired position. It's not your default position. You were created in belief. You were created as a believer. All the studies prove it, that even a child believes in a higher power. Atheism is an acquired position that comes later. And Allah says, and I think Sabur brought it up last time, that when the people will be dragged to the hellfire, the angels will say to them, it was because you didn't reason, because you didn't think, you didn't reason. So Allah's given you an opportunity, and that's why I know perhaps you don't want to bring religion into it, but I think it is important, because the Quran constantly reminds the person, reason, think. Do you not think? Do you not reason? And so what it means is that if you do sit and you think and you reason with an open heart and an open mind, really there's only one rational conclusion that you can arrive at. But if you now forcibly deny that existence of the creator and decide to do whatever you want to do, becoming an opponent to God, a challenger to God, then sorry, but what do you expect?
Yeah.
You might not agree with the punishment. You might not agree that you might say it's very harsh. I'd say, yes, it is very harsh. It's a harsh punishment to burn in hell. Yes, absolutely. But you're given every tool possible to recognize the creator, the very existence of this universe. It screams out to you that a creator exists. Now, if you forcibly deny that or keep going into your, your safe house, your safe zone of saying, well, I don't know, I don't want to think about these things, well, then blame yourselves, because this is what Allah says in the Quran. Blame yourself. Don't blame Allah.
Does anybody
It's like an
understand the
arrogance
question?
about it, isn't it?
I want to
Huh?
just say that. Sorry.
Question answered.
So I was just going to say that this question assumes that. Oh, sorry. There's a big lag.
No, I think the lag's on.
I think there's a delay on
Oh,
yours,
okay.
Ben. I think.
Is it me? I think it's you, bro. Sorry, man. Won't be long. So
Is it me?
Yeah, it's you. This question's assuming that it's got assumption behind it, I think. So it's assuming that the action that God is punishing people for eternity is a wrong thing.
Yeah.
So if he claiming that is wrong, and that is immoral. If he is, then he's going to have to prove that, unfortunately.
But God doesn't answer to anybody. That's
that's the other thing. So like when he's saying what are the consequences, like who's going to hold him to account for anything? He is the source of all power.
That's it.
Yeah.
He's the eternal being.
This is what I mean. It's proper silly.
There is nothing above which, there is no holding him accountable for anything.
Yeah.
And it's another emotional argument as well. And it's not a lot.
It's fueled by mysotheism.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Shall we let the link
Abbas,
out now? Let the atheists come on.
Yeah, go on. You know what Abbas was saying about
One second.
Am I still delayed?
Yeah, go on.
No,
Go
we
on,
can hear
Jordan,
you.
go on. I just want to make another point before we start inviting people on.
Yeah.
Go on,
So
Jordan.
what I was saying to Abbas made the point about the wasp, and this is something. It's kind of there's like an arrogance, isn't there, that you, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's called egocentrism, isn't it? It's where you you only see the world from your eyes, so you don't even willing to sort of look at it from any other direction. And whether it's the wasp or feeling pain, maybe I cried when I watched the Titanic or anything like that. And to me, to be honest, I didn't. But from an atheist point of view, just I guess to finish off my point is, none of it really matters, does it? If we're all just particles, if we're all just lumps of things put together, even the suffering and pain that's there, what's the real relevance of even discussing it as an atheist? I would say.
Yeah. So he made another comment. He said, if this isn't the thing I wanted to lead on to, and I'll try and make it quick. He said, if an authority God is able to get away with doing the worst thing ever, how can he be trusted? But he's completely neglecting what we've said here. Like, how have you established that it's the worst thing ever? Like,
because I thought it. So that's why.
Well, this is the thing. So, like, you need to establish, like, how do you determine that the source of everything, that the most knowledgeable, the most wise? Because in order to say that, you have to presuppose the existence of the thing that you're critiquing. So you have to say that it's all wise, that it's the most just, that it's the most merciful. That, like, all of these things are included in that concept. So how can you then follow that on to saying that he has committed the worst thing ever and he's getting away with it? No, whatever he's done, if he's done it, there is a just reason behind it. You can't make that unless you show us demonstratively why it's the worst thing ever. You're just making the claim. So no, it's not.
Also, a big mistake I think atheists make, especially not with when they criticize other religions, but when they criticize Muslims. So, guys, what's the first ayah or verse in almost all the surahs of the chapters of the Quran?
The most merciful, the most gracious.
The most merciful, not the all merciful.
Yeah.
So it's a there's a bit of a difference. There's a big philosophical difference as
Yeah.
well.
Most
distinction
loving
between the
couple.
For you guys to criticize our concept of the creator, I recommend looking up what we believe are the attributes of the creator and understanding it, because you're bringing Christian arguments to a Muslim table or Islamic table, and that's the big problem atheists had about 10 years ago. The atheists were smashing it back then because they were debating Christians that believed in a book that they didn't know if it was reliable or not. They believed because they wanted to believe. But then when Muslims started to step into the table, they had to go a bit and to have a little think. And now they're back, and they're now they're back. And I really recommend just looking.
That's
up.
what I said, bro. Factory reset, mate. They get triggered by me saying that. Factory
it's true. So you got to use different arguments, guys. We don't believe God's all merciful, because then he couldn't be anything else. All loving. With them, he's the most loving. Out of all the
More
things
loving
that
than
exist,
anything you can imagine.
out of all the things that exist, he's the most merciful out of everything.
Being all merciful leads to being stupid in many cases, because there's certain, like, if someone comes up to you and like you say he's addicted to drugs and blah 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 blah, and he steals from you, and you're merciful to him, and you go, it's all right, go away, and you know that you're showing a mercy there. And he comes back, he does it again, and you're like, oh no, it's all right, go away, and he keeps coming back, and you just keep going, oh, it's all right, go away, do what you want. Like, at that point, your mercy is being taken advantage of, and it's no longer like a commendable thing,
positive thing. It's not
it becomes a stupidity, because you're now allowing this person to just keep committing a crime, especially, and if if you're a ruler and he's doing it to other people, and you just keep having mercy on him, and it's like other people are waiting for justice here. It's like, what are you doing? He keeps committing the crime, and you're going on as if being merciful here is some sort of, you know, like always being merciful is commendable. And it's demonstrably not the case. You know, this is why we say he's the most merciful, and he's also the most just, and he's the most wise. And there's always a balance between these things. Mercy is given where it is worthy to be given, and when people cross a line, they become what's the word? Unworthy. They're not worthy of receiving mercy, and justice takes precedent in that case, and then justice is made, because again, we don't live in isolated bubbles. We live in a society. We live with each other, and you know, people often neglect this. So, but to kind of wrap up, before you wanted to do the thing that I really wanted to mention was this massive jump that Tay-Jump making jumps made when, like, you were asking him. And it was like, so what is what makes something immoral? And he said it's the involuntary imposition of will. I really wanted to know where he got that from, because it just, like, he was making these claims, nature's this, you know.
That's why I brought the rabbit and the eagle into the equation.
Yeah, and then he was like, and then just threw that one out there, and I was waiting for some sort of justification. Maybe I missed it. I've not managed to watch the whole thing, so hopefully it comes somewhere towards the end. But like, in his saying that, there was very little justification. It'd be really nice to kind of get something from that. But it was really, really weird. And there are some issues that come along with this. So, for example, like morality, like it's supposed to be something that suggests things we ought to do and ought not to do. Now, are there consequences in his idea of morality? Is there a punishment for those who don't abide by morality? And if there isn't, what's the point on talking about these things at all? And if there is a punishment, that's an imposition of will.
Exactly.
So if someone commits a crime, so if someone murders someone, or if someone commits genocide, you know, or a mass murderer, we'll go for like one of these crazy people that you find in America, and he kills a number of people, whether you put him in prison, whether you lash him, whether you put him to death, all three of these are an imposition of will. He doesn't necessarily want that punishment. But is it just to not punish him, to let people do that and get away with it? No. So his own framework, saying something is immoral if it is an involuntary imposition of will, implies that any sort of
punish
consequence,
criminals.
any punishment is itself immoral. So, like, what do? You just go, hey, you guy, stop killing all those people. It's not nice. Like, so what's it like? How is it that you're going to motivate people to abide by this morality?
And then you're going to abolish war. There'll be no wars anymore, and it just becomes a minefield.
Well, that's the thing. It gives power to the immoral. So
yes,
let's say we agree, right? Yeah. What is immoral is that which is an involuntary imposition of will. Let's say a very immoral nation grows that says, I don't care, I'm going to impose my will on everyone else. How do you combat that? What do? Nazi Germany start popping up, start running around causing havoc. How do you stop them in a moral way? You can't. So what happens? They conquer, and it's just the will to power now. Like, what is right and wrong is just whatever they've set it, because it becomes law. You know, like, and
but it becomes even more absurd than that, because you couldn't send your child up to bed.
Is immoral,
because what you're doing is you're imposing your on them involuntarily for them. If you said to your child, okay, 7 o'clock, have your bedtime, it's bedtime.
Making them eat the greens.
No, Dad, you're
imposing
being
your will upon me.
I only want to eat ice cream and chocolate from now on, Mummy and Daddy. The moral thing there is just to let them eat ice cream and chocolate and never have any sort of other nutrition.
Sounds like a good world.
Yeah.
And we've got any
he said in an ideal world, eagles wouldn't eat rabbits.
Yeah, they'd be friends, wouldn't they? They'd be friends, eagles and rabbits. They'd be buddies.
That was the other thing.
Christian in the rapture.
That was the other thing.
So, Abbas, the link hasn't been given out yet.
One last thing, give it out because it might take a bit of time to get them on.
So
yeah, we've been talking for an hour. Shall we just before we carry on chatting, Abbas, sorry, and Anis, could you pop the link up, please?
Put the link out there and store them up ready.
Just a last kind of finishing comment on that. So his idea that you would have to like kind of stop, or the idea that like a animal or a carnivore eating another animal is immoral, sort of necessitates this idea of moving the human being towards the status of God, that is to have complete control over nature in order to make things moral. And so this idea that like a lion eating another animal out of necessity, because it's a carnivore, like it doesn't eat corn like and other things, in order to make the world a moral place, because he was comparing it to the ideal where there would be no imposition of will. You would have to somehow like give a substitute meal to every lion, and to like not just that, it would kind of go through the whole hierarchy of animals. So there's all these weird little bugs that eat things against their will, and like you would have to like there's a fungus that infects the brain of certain insects. It turns them into zombies, and so you would have to sort of figure out a way to prevent that immoral act in order to reach this.
The Emerald Wasp.
Sorry, guys. I just want to double check for people, the audience. It is just atheists we're asking on the stream, isn't it?
Right. Just so you know, I think this Hatem Al-Sharidi, he messaged me saying that he's dealt with T-Jump and he knows a lot of this philosophical stuff. So he's not an atheist, but he could be useful as well.
I've got someone that's good. That would be good to come on.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, let's bring Rob on, inshallah.
Yeah,
hey, Rob, you all right, mate?
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, man. Good, man.
6 on 1, eh? You're outnumbered, but it's
no.
all
I'm just a host, so it's 5 on 1. So don't worry about it.
No problem.
I'm just going to say smirky comments here and there.
That's okay. You go ahead, then. I don't choose to take offense. Offense isn't given; it's taken. So you have control over whether you're offended or not. And I choose not to be, so it's not a problem.
I'd love to test that in real life.
Go for it, buddy. Anytime you want.
Next time I see you.
Anytime. Yeah, so we did a stream on it. Obviously, I heard your thing last night. It was a bit late for me to come on, so my colleague Stop Spamming came on and T-Jump came on, obviously. And we did a review critique of the first 52 minutes, which was your guys' intro, so we haven't got to the actual with the other things, but we certainly found a lot of problems with that. So maybe I can respond to your 3 main questions, if you like, and then you can go from there. How's that?
Do each one at a time, if you like. You can start with belief.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your assertion about that?
You said you come to respond to it.
Yeah. So your view is that, hey, when an atheist says you have a belief, other people also have a belief, and a belief needs to be justified, but a belief can also be true without evidence. Correct?
Oh, okay, we've danced this dance. You know that if you I know you didn't watch the stream live. You watched it back because you basically cut it up and put it on your channel. So you've
Correct.
seen the stream, so you know exactly what I said. So
Yeah.
because you've actually put that segment on your channel. So can you
Correct.
respond to what I said?
Yep. Okay. So when you say that a belief doesn't need to have evidence, that's true in the sense that you could randomly have a belief that is true, but that wouldn't be a belief that you could justify because you wouldn't have good reasons. So, and if somebody pointed that out to you, then you would obviously, you would hope you would revise your belief. So if I said, hey, I believe, I don't know, in fairies, and somebody said to me, Rob, why do you believe in fairies? And I go, you know what, I don't know. At that point, because I don't have any good reasons, it could be that fairies exist. But at that point, I'd be going, I haven't got any good reasons. Maybe I should withhold that belief. Maybe I should become undecided, or maybe I should dismiss that belief until I've got good reasons to believe it.
Yeah. So just in a nutshell, so you don't paraphrase me, and so you can respond to exactly what I said. Okay. So this is in response to atheists that make the claim, either prove you're God, yeah, or God doesn't exist. Yeah. So some will say prove God exists, and you can't say atheists don't do that because they do.
What,
and I know
what do they mean by prove? So what do they mean when they say prove?
Demonstrate it. Bring evidence that God exists. Prove
Correct.
it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, like Stop Spamming was trying to say that atheists don't do this. Atheists do this. Yeah. And also the other thing that atheists do is they make the assertion that God doesn't exist. So not all atheists. Some atheists are happy to say, well, you know what? I don't believe God exists. If you do, good luck to you. But when an atheist says God doesn't exist, they obviously, that's a claim.
Hello?
Obviously, they
Sure.
can't support that claim with any evidence because you can't falsify that. So,
well, that's not necessarily true, right? It depends on the God claim. And this was the sort of point I had with you. Is
I'm not talking about God at this point. I'm not talking about anything at this point. There's no specifics to what I'm saying. It's a principle.
Yeah, but you're saying you can't falsify it. You can't.
No, what I'm
falsify
saying to you, yeah, you can't prove to me something doesn't exist.
Well, it depends what it is. If it's self-contradictory, then I could prove it. So if there was a God, if there was a claim, whatever the claim is, let's say it's a God claim, a particular God claim, and the God is, say, the person makes the claim that the God is good and the God is bad. That is a contradiction. Agreed?
Okay,
and
let me say this to you then. Prove to me, Rob, prove to me Ganesh doesn't exist.
What is Ganesh?
Indian elephant god.
And what are the attributes and so forth of that God?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you see, you've got to give that information. Otherwise, how can you disprove it? So if somebody makes, the only thing that is difficult to disprove is a deist God, because there's no claims about that other than this God exists and it created the universe. As soon as you get to a theist God, there's specific claims, right?
All right, okay. Prove to me Allah doesn't exist.
Okay, sure. The fact that your Quran, you believe comes from Allah. I believe that the Quran does not come from Allah, and therefore Allah does not exist. It's a man-made book, and if the claim it is, well, let me finish it. And if
the claim,
if the book is man-made, and the claim is that Allah created the book, and that if the book does not exist, then Allah does not exist.
Why?
Because Allah created the book, and you would know nothing about Allah if the book is false. If a human made it up, then Allah does not exist.
No, Allah could still exist even if.
Well, how would you know that Allah exists?
Man-made.
No, it's not about.
It's not about whether we know. It's about whether or not it's possible. So he could still exist. Showing, even if you were to show that the Quran was man-made, that wouldn't necessitate the non-existence of God.
Could there exist something?
God, right?
Could there exist?
You said that Allah wouldn't exist.
We're going to have a shotgun here. Who am I going to speak to? I can't speak to 5 different people.
Sorry, just on this point. Can something exist that you're not aware of?
Of course.
Okay, so then that's not a case that you're making.
Well, when you say prove, I'm giving reasons why I think that if the Quran was not true, Allah doesn't exist. Well, okay, so what do you consider proof?
You can't provide proof.
What do you consider proof?
It's impossible to provide proof.
What do you consider proof? If you ask me for proof and you can't tell me what proof is, then you're just going to deny anything I say.
A reasoned argument that has that's sound and
valid.
Right,
let's move on. If you can't tell me what the criteria is for proof, then
can I just come in there, Rob?
Yeah, go for it.
Rob, the important thing is, what do you consider as proof for the existence of God, and how would you be convinced? And the reason why I'm asking you that, Rob, is that pretty much every atheist that I've spoken to has a different criteria as to what they need to satisfy the claim of God existing. Now, I've even asked atheists, if a hand came down from the clouds and pointed at you and said, I want you to worship me, I am God, would you accept it? The person thought for a while, his gaze sort of went to the left or the right, and he said, probably not. So the reality here, Rob, is it's you who needs to tell us what you would accept, because every atheist seems to have a different criteria as to what the evidence would be that they would require for evidence of God. Now, what I would suggest to you, Rob, is that if there are a reasonable number of possibilities as to how this universe came into existence, you can either prove God by proving God directly, i.e. visible, observable evidence, or the other way would be to look at the arguments against the creator of God, i.e. how the universe could have come into existence in any other way. And if those ways are false or not provable or are highly doubtable, then the only thing you are left with rationally, logically, is some entity that is eternal and that had to have, as a necessity, brought the existence of this universe into being. That's a deductive argument. And it's a sound way of finding truth. Now, we're not claiming, Rob, as theists, that we have analytical or empirical evidence to prove the existence of God. We're saying we have good reasons to believe that God exists.
Abbas, did God interact in this world in some empirical way?
Can we just stay on the previous point just one second?
That's irrelevant, Rob. Talk about the
universe. You don't have empirical evidence. And I'm saying you should have empirical evidence.
Rob, if you told me you've got a dog in the kitchen with you right now, could I prove you haven't got a dog with you?
You probably could find a way to do it. You could say, switch your camera on. You could find some way to do it, right?
No, but could I prove you haven't got a dog?
In the kitchen, yeah. Or you could ask my neighbor. There's ways to demonstrate I don't have a dog.
No, but now I'm saying.
That's very second.
And say you had a blue dragon. Say you've got a blue dragon in the back garden. Could I prove you haven't?
Well, if it was invisible, probably not.
Right, so how would I prove it didn't exist then?
Well, you'd go, hey, well, it depends what you mean by proof, right? I couldn't see it. I'm on my phone.
Well, how can I make the claim it doesn't exist? How can I make the claim it doesn't exist?
Yeah, because
how can I support that claim?
Yeah, okay, so because it's an extraordinary claim, and we have no evidence of invisible dragons existing, therefore it's likely that an invisible dragon does not exist.
No, but that demonstrates invisible dragons don't exist.
That will show that it's likely that invisible dragons do not exist. Yeah. Do you accept that as evidence?
I don't think I could disprove haven't got one. But I don't think I would say you haven't got one.
Yeah, but Hamza, it depends what you mean by proof.
Well, I've just said.
Well, if you accept what I've just said, then that would be in inverted commas proof.
Huh?
If you accept what I just said, then inverted commas, that's proof. If you make an extraordinary claim, if I make an extraordinary claim that I have an invisible dragon in my backyard, and you say, hang on, Rob, what reasons have you got for believing it? And I say
no. You keep using my argument now. I didn't ask what reasons you got to believe you got a dragon. I just said I wouldn't say you haven't got one because I couldn't prove you haven't got one.
Why wouldn't you say that? That seems to me why would you not say I haven't got a dragon?
I'm just demonstrating you can't prove something doesn't exist.
I think there's a bit of miscommunication between Rob and the rest. I think Rob is saying that good reasons is proof, which Hamza doesn't think that's proof. It's just good reasons. Is that, am I right?
I believe, yes, look, the whole point of what was going back to the original point, belief is the acceptance of something to be true. You agree with that, Rob, isn't it?
Yeah, acceptance of a proposition as true or likely true, yeah.
Right, that's what belief is. And so what happens, you see, is when you say that, when I say I can't prove God exists, I believe God exists. And then that means I accept the proposition of God existing, and I give my reasons for why that is. That's how, and the only way you can counter then my reasons for my belief is by countering my reasons. You agree with that, don't you?
Sure, but that's a trivial point. That's the same.
No. It's not a trivial point. I'll tell you why. Because when you come to this point, the atheist pulls out Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, all the other religions, 3,000 religions in the world. So because they haven't got proof and they believe, then they're true as well. So you agree with me then that it all has to be reasoned, isn't it?
Well, any claim will have some reasons behind it. Otherwise, you shouldn't be holding the
Right.
claim, right?
So you agree then that Ricky Gervais's nonsensical 3,000 God arguments is in fact nonsensical if you're using the principle of belief and reasoned belief?
Well, what do you mean?
The idea that Ricky Gervais says there's 3,000 gods, you reject them all for just one God, and I reject that God as well, so I just believe in one less God than you. The idea that because you believe something, that means everything's on the table then. But that's not true, is it?
Because you believe something, everything's on the table.
No. If you believe something to be true, it doesn't mean that everything else other people believe to be true are true also, does it?
No, but they would have the same reasons, right?
No,
They
would
they're gonna
have the same reason. No.
Well,
They
they're
wouldn't
gonna
have the
their
same
reasons.
reasons.
Yeah, but
They
they're
wouldn't
gonna
have the
their
same
reasons.
reasons. No. They
What's
wouldn't
wrong with
have.
Ricky Gervais saying that? That's what I want to know.
Okay,
what's
they
problem?
wouldn't have the same reasons. They would have their own reasons.
Correct. Yeah, they'd have their own reasons. Yeah.
Right. And then what you can do is reason through them. So just because I accept the existence of Allah doesn't mean I have to accept the existence of Zeus and the existence of
But have you
Ganesh
investigated
and Vishnu.
Okay, but Hamza, have you investigated the reasons?
So what I'm saying to you is that I have actually. I did go through all the religions.
All
before I came to
3,000.
Islam.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
You went through all 3,000.
No.
Yeah,
I narrowed it down to monotheistic for my belief in what creators should be by necessity. I didn't believe in, for example, when you read the story of Ganesh, the elephant god, how he lost his head and they couldn't find it, and as soon as you say God couldn't do something for me, that isn't God, and you've lost my attention.
That's your arbitrary definition of God.
Yes, that's mine.
Okay, well that's fine. But that's your opinion.
Right. So what I'm saying to you is this. No. But the point I'm making is this. So when I say I believe something to be true, doesn't automatically make all the other 3,000 beliefs true, does it?
No, of course it doesn't make them true.
Right. So it's nonsensical then for an atheist to make that claim. When as soon as I mention that I believe something to be true, then it automatically makes everyone's belief true. That's nonsensical, isn't it?
No, but that's not what the atheist is saying. I don't make that claim anyway. I don't.
No. I'm not saying you. Look,
Yeah,
look, remember one thing, Rob. I'm addressing what's come at me, and I guarantee you, if you look in the comments, as soon as I mention belief, Tooth Fairy will come out the pocket, 100%, without even thinking. I had some guy say to me, "Prove there's no invisible pink monkey on Mars."
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and then he obviously didn't believe in pink invisible monkeys. I didn't believe in
but that's irrelevant.
monkeys.
Hamza,
No, but Allahu Akbar.
That's one of the
point.
critiques. No, hang on, listen. Hang on a moment. Listen, that's one of the critiques I had against you. It's irrelevant whether he believes it. That's complete red herring. What he's doing, let me explain to you. What he's doing is bringing up another belief and saying, hey, you can't disprove that.
No, but he can't.
You're saying to him, hang on, this is the reason why an atheist does it. I don't think it's the best argument, but this is the reason an atheist does it. Because you guys are saying,
let's do it.
Let me finish. Otherwise, you're not going to know why the atheist does it. You can critique it if you like. But the reason why atheists do it is because you're saying, hey, atheist, you can't disprove my God, Allah. And so the atheist comes back and says, hey, Hamza, you can't disprove the pink cat on Mars. They don't have to believe it. All they're doing is a reductio ad absurdum against your position. Do you know what that means?
Is it doing what against my position?
They're doing a reductio ad absurdum against your position. Now, you can critique it. All that means is they're giving you a counter-example to show why they think your position is absurd.
Right. But my position is not that, is it?
Just as much as they can't disprove your
God.
God.
Rob,
that's why they're doing
that's
it.
misrepresenting my position, isn't it?
No, it's not.
It
It's
is.
a reductio.
No, because it's not at all. Because my position is not God exists. You're responding to my God exists.
Your position is not that God exists.
No, that's not my position.
What is your position?
My position, I believe God exists.
Okay, that's your epistemic position. Do you think there's an ontological view of the world in which Allah exists?
My belief, yes.
Okay, well,
you're making a distinction between belief and knowledge.
I'm making a distinction here. See, for example, I'm not telling you God exists. I'm telling you I believe God exists. Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant to me. I'm not asserting my belief upon you.
Do you think? Okay, Hamza, there's two things here. One is your belief. The other is the state of being, the ontological state of. There's a state of affairs in the world. In that state of affairs, in your eyes, God exists, right?
I believe God exists.
Yeah, there's a belief about the God, and
I
then there's the proposition that a God exists. Those are two separate
the proposition.
things.
Right.
Right.
So if I'm telling you, no, but here's the problem, Rob. If I'm telling you I've accepted a proposition, I'm not imposing that proposition on you.
Do you believe it's true?
I believe it's true, yes.
Okay. Do you think other people who are rational should believe something if it's true?
I believe if they go for the reasons why I believe it's true, yes.
Yes, then you are actually saying to
No,
other people they should
no, I'm
believe it.
not. No,
You
I'm
are
not.
mistaken, Hamza.
No, I'm not. You're
One of your
mistaken,
friends
Rob.
here can help you. You're
Rob,
mistaken.
Rob, you dumb
If I
yourself,
tell
my
you
friend.
God exists, if I tell you God exists, I'm a certainty you God exists, and you're stupid for not believing in God. I am not doing that. I'm saying to you, I
you're being
believe.
stupid, Hamza. I didn't say you're being stupid. I'm saying that there is there is an inference that if I'm rational and you've got good reasons, I should believe what you believe. That there's an inference there.
I'm saying to you is this: my reasons for believing in the existence of a creator are 100% logical. That's what I'm saying, right?
Do you think they've got good reasons? Do you think you've got good reasons?
My reasons are 100% logical. Yes.
I'm not asking if they're logical. That's a very low bar. That's the lowest bar you can have. That's like getting on the first bar of the ladder. That's
reasonable.
That's trivially. Don't pat yourself on the back for that. That's nothing to be. That's a trivial point.
So you're saying
something that's logical.
Rob, just so I understand, are you saying if I say my belief is rational, logical, and reasonable, you're saying to me that's a low position to hold?
No,
Rob is an idiot.
Okay, you said.
Can you not make derogatory comments, please?
Yeah, pick that guy.
Please don't make derogatory comments. We're trying to have a civil discussion here, please. If you come on the panel, please be respectful.
It was Evo. It's just again.
Yeah, Evo's gone then.
Okay, so where
can I just come in there for 1 second?
That was you. Yeah, sorry, bro. It's just rude, man.
I'm not telling you. I'm
It
not
wasn't
making
Hattem.
an assertive claim to you.
He just said it was.
He said it wasn't him.
Oh, okay, feel free to come back on, bro. So it's a bit confusing.
No, when he spoke, his thing went off.
Let's try again quickly on this, and then we can move on. If Hamza, there's certain things that follow logically, and if you believe that what you believe is true, you've got good reasons, and you think that rational people should believe things that are true, then you're inferring that I should believe what you believe. You can't get away from that.
No. That's different, though. I'm not telling you something as a fact.
Hamza, do you believe that God exists?
You don't have to believe it. Rob.
Okay, let's move on. He's not going to accept this point. Maybe one of your friends can assist you with this.
Let's move on. He's not trying to say
we're not getting anywhere here.
He's not trying to say that by admitting to what he's just said there that you're going to try to force people. All he's saying is that you believe that there is good reason, and if there is good reason, that people should, if they wish to follow reason well, they should become Muslim. And I think it's fair to say that we do want that. Like
correct.
I would.
Thank you, Yusuf.
So I would
That's
say
exactly
that.
What I'm saying. Yeah.
So I would say that I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I believe I have good reasons to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I have good reasons to believe Islam is the true religion. And I would I want other people to be Muslim as well. And I think people should.
Rational, and Yusuf, if they're rational and you give them good reasons, you would expect them to believe it, correct?
Yes. And so I would expect them, if they're being reasonable and they're being open-minded to the positions that I put forward, that it would follow from that that they should become Muslim.
Correct. It's not a big
but
deal.
that's not implying. I think there was a bit of a confusion. Maybe you thought that it implied
it's a logical inference. Yeah, it's a logical.
No, but what's the
inference.
difference if I
Like
come to you
holding a hammer over somebody's head?
If I come to you, Rob, and say God exists, do I not need to prove that claim?
Yes, you need to give reasons, but the expectation is that if you give good reasons, and I'm a rational person who cares about the truth, I should be convinced.
There's more to human beings than rationale, to be honest with you. But the point here is
Let's move on. See,
no, I don't want to. I just want to establish this.
Okay, but it's just
I think it's a very important principle to establish. I'm saying to you, my belief is none of your business. First thing, I'm not trying to assert it onto you. I'm telling you why I believe and the reasons why. I'm not. I don't care. In reality, whether you believe what I believe is irrelevant. Just as I told you, I believe my father's my father, and I give you all the rational reasons. Oh, he looks like me, and this, that, the other. Whether you believe he's my father is irrelevant.
Let's move on. You're talking nonsense. Yusuf has explained it.
Rob.
Again,
I'm not talking nonsense.
It takes you a long time to understand it. I don't want to battle with you over this. There's other guys that I can speak to as well here. You're battling with this.
Rob,
you are asserting that your belief is true, and if it's rational, I should believe it too. By the way, I do the same, and I don't have a problem with that.
Calm down, man. Calm down.
Have a nice conversation, Rob. There's no need to get.
I'm cool.
I understand in some other streams it might be really aggressive in that.
We're just having a conversation.
Chill out, bro. No shouting.
I'm cool. Sorry,
Rob,
you sound a bit tense.
Rob, by Hamza saying he believes, if I say to you I believe in God, I may be inferring also that I could be wrong. So I'm not really forcing it on anyone, or even if I was trying to convince someone else of a belief.
Jordan, did you hear what we said after that? If you believe in God and you think you have good reasons, and you think other people should care about good reasons and follow the truth, then it follows from that other people should be convinced if in fact your reasons are good. It's a
how
natural,
is that any different from the atheist position? How is that any different from
No,
the
he said
atheist
it's the
It's
same.
not
position?
different. I've acknowledged
Yeah,
it's
he
exactly
said it
the
was
same.
the
I've
same.
got no problem with that.
Okay.
Let's move on to the other point, because the other point, I think there were two other points that I wanted to bring up, and obviously I don't want to take the whole of your time, and there's plenty of other guys, but there's two other things. One was this claim about evolution and a God, and I think that the way Hamza framed it was not, if I can be diplomatic about it, I think it was poorly framed. And each of the atheists said the same thing, and Hamza either didn't remember it, didn't hear it, or ignored it entirely. So his question
what
was,
did I ask?
hey,
What was the question I asked?
I will tell you. The question was, hey, does evolution disprove a God? And that is not an honest question.
Oh, okay, that's not what I asked.
And I'll tell you why.
That's not what was said.
That's not what was said. You're paraphrasing it. Should I tell you what was said?
What was said?
All right. So I'll ask you the question, Rob. Do you believe if the theory of evolution is true, that disproves the existence of a creator?
How is that different from what I just said?
I'm just answering the question I asked in those words.
Which creator? That's my point. Which creator? Because it's you're just making it like a
which creator would follow
which creator?
Guys, could I just address this very briefly? So there's one thing that you're doing, Rob, often, which I see, is that and atheists do this, and I don't know why this thinking is, and this is what Hamza was dealing with in the first place, that as soon as you posit a creator, you start asking about which creator, and you bring all of the myriad concepts of the creator that there might be into the equation.
Yeah.
Now the problem with that is it doesn't actually deal with the problem. So it doesn't actually deal with the question that we're trying to answer, because you can have multiple theories about a concept. None of those multiple theories, however many they may be, just by existing, negates the existence of the concept in the first place, or an observation in the first place. For example, having more than one theory of gravity that might be being discussed doesn't negate that gravity exists. Having more than one theory about how evolution works would not negate the evolutionary process. So the fact that there are other concepts of the creator doesn't negate the existence of the creator in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the thing to do is let's agree a foundational. So what is it? The question to ask really is, before you go into this, which creator you're talking about, specifically say what criteria are we applying to this word that you're using as a creator, and then we can move forward from there, rather than bringing this false idea that there's loads of the concepts of God, therefore God doesn't exist, because it doesn't follow.
I'm not saying God doesn't exist. Imran, hang on.
Great. So let's define what we mean by the term, and then we can move on from that.
That's what I'm asking for, and Hamza is not doing that. He's giving a generic
Okay. I'll do exactly what I did. I believe the creator is the first cause of the universe, everything that exists. Nothing on that stream we did on Friday mentioned religion. Nothing.
No,
so
it did, but okay, you need to go rewatch it. But that's a side point. I'm talking. Let me make it simple for you. Evolution does not disprove a deist God. Evolution, common descent, does disprove a theist God, where the theist specific God's claim is that man was created by God alone and is not from a common ancestor. Would you agree that it falsifies that theistic God?
No, because there's a number of explanations you could give, which would still include that. So, for example, like we don't even deny, well, we can't deny that change occurs over time, especially if we have a common ancestor with Adam and Eve. How else would you describe all the different races? So we would say that from Adam and Eve, changes obviously do occur because you've got different races. What we would deny is that it doesn't make sense. We would say that it's false to say that it doesn't make sense that if there is an all-powerful God, that he could create a world where animals evolve and change and things occur, and then in the middle of that, he could not place two beings.
Okay, Yusuf, let me ask you something.
Go on.
Does your claim about these two beings, do they have a common ancestor that was something like in between a chimp and a human?
No, but no, I would say that Adam and Eve were created without parents, and that they were placed on Earth.
No ancestors, correct? No ancestors.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that evolution, commonly understood as being common descent, falsifies, or your claim and evolution are in contradiction with each other?
No, it doesn't.
I would say that evolution occurs, that we don't necessarily have common descent with.
That's the basis of evolution, regardless.
No, because there's a difference between like a Darwinian evolution, and then
I'm not talking
the
about
general
Darwinian,
theory of
hang on.
evolution.
But we
Listen,
were
I'm not
talking about Darwinian
Darwinian.
evolution.
All
We
I'm
were.
talking about is common descent. Every single, and you can ask Sabur this as well. Every single, as far as I can tell, evolutionary biologist, evolutionary philosopher accepts common descent. Doesn't matter about the mechanism. I'm not even talking about the mechanism. But if common descent is true, then your understanding of the Islamic creation thing is in contradiction with that view of evolution. Agreed?
But you can't say ignore Darwinian evolution because we were specific about it.
Now, can I just say one thing here, Hamza? Can I just say one thing? Rob, we believe that Adam and Eve were a creation of God, okay?
I understand
Now we don't deny that there may well have been things that existed that were not completely human before Adam and Eve. But we believe that Adam and Eve were a supernatural creation inserted within that mechanism. That is something that is supernatural, that fits in to that mechanism.
No,
and
it doesn't.
And therefore, hold on a second, and therefore, that in itself does not falsify whether a creator exists or doesn't exist, because we believe it's a supernatural interaction within that process. So it could be, or it might not be, but regardless, it's supernatural. So the issue here, Rob, actually is this. Before we even jump onto evolution, we need to answer where the universe itself, the playground for all this
Not
creation.
at the moment, Abbas. We don't need to at the moment.
Excuse me, we do need to, because I'll tell you
Abbas,
why,
we're
Rob.
talking about this particular
Rob, I'll tell you why.
from the stream. You're going
Rob,
off on
I'll give
a
you a rational reason why you need to do that first.
No, you don't.
Because
Abbas,
if you
at this stage.
establish, Rob, because if you establish from a reasoned argument that there is a necessity for a first cause, and that first cause is the creator of everything, then quite frankly, the evolutionary mechanism is irrelevant, because you've already established that a creator has to exist by necessity. So you're jumping the gun at the moment. You need to go back first to creation of this universe and how it's come about in the very first place. Without jumping many billions of years ahead and many steps ahead and start talking about human evolution.
Abbas, the claim that Hamza put forward was nothing to do with cosmology or anything like that. The claim was that evolution, commonly understood as common descent, is compatible with a God. And obviously, now we've critiqued it a bit more, we're talking about a specific God. And I said, and I'm quite happy to agree that a deist God is not falsified.
I didn't make a claim, Rob.
I'm quite happy to agree that a deist God is not falsified by evolution.
No, but I didn't make a claim.
Like that you've just made. Okay, we can't all speak at once here. I tell you what, you speak, because if you interrupt me incessantly, we don't get anywhere, Hamza. I know you've got a lot of ego, but just take it easy.
Okay, it's nothing to do with ego.
It does. You want to interrupt incessantly.
Well, if you misrepresent me, I have to interrupt you. All right? I didn't make any claims. So
you're always making a claim. When you open your mouth and you make a proposition, you're making a claim.
Weren't we going on Dawkins?
Speak to your colleagues.
No.
You're profoundly mistaken about
so you're interrupting me now.
Well, I have to interrupt you when you're making a mistake, don't I?
I didn't make a mistake. I told you. That's right. So you're telling me if I ask a question, it's a claim?
When you make a claim,
no. When I ask a question, is that a claim?
There is a claim inherent in that. Yes.
Me asking a question.
Hamza, were we not talking about Dawkins? Dawkins said that.
Can I just speak to Yusuf or Abbas or somebody?
Yeah, Dawkins said
this is like a dogpiling here. We can't get anywhere. So who?
I was talking to Hamza actually, Rob. I was talking to Hamza, not you.
Yeah. So Dawkins said that you can be an atheist and believe in you don't have to be an atheist to believe in evolution.
Yeah. So Dawkins said
that. Dawkins said that. Now the evolution and how Islam looks at evolution was going to be done on the next stream anyway, in detail. Yeah. Because we have to know as Muslims how to deal with this question. So we didn't even really go deep into it. I just wanted to challenge the claim when an atheist says science has proven evolution, therefore there is no God, which is completely against.
And the atheist that says that, what specifically are they referring to when they say no God?
I'm assuming they're assuming to the God creator.
Okay. Can I invite you, Hamza, not
to it's usually when it's against
rather
creation.
Ask them what God are they talking about? Because if they were talking about a deist God, I would agree with you that it does not falsify a deist God. When they say they're talking about it falsifies God, they're talking about your specific God. rather than not making assumptions, that's not a good idea.
Are
you speaking about my God,
on the
Allah,
next
or are you
stream,
speaking about some other God? If you ask
so
me
like
a
I
question,
said,
you'll quickly get an answer, won't you?
like I said, on the next stream, we'll Sabur, your mate, will demonstrate how as Muslims we view evolution and how we understand it.
Hamza,
So you
the
might
only
be better.
claim,
You might be
Hamza,
better to wait for that stream, get some more information rather than the few books you've read. And
Hamza, there is one
take it on
claim
from
on the
that
table
point.
here. There is one claim on the table, which was you asked the question, does evolution falsify God or a God?
Yes.
And now we've gone to when, because that's the claim that you say atheists make. And I've just established with you that when an atheist says that, he's not talking about some generic God. He's likely talking, he knows you're a Muslim and he's saying your God. And I spoke to Yusuf there, and I don't know whether we have agreement here or not. But if, as Abbas said, that Adam and Eve, or the first humans, were brought into existence by God and they did not have a common ancestor,
Yes.
and evolution talks about common descent, and that includes humans, then evolution and the proposition that Abbas has put forward are in conflict. They cannot both be true.
Could I just make a statement here on this very point, Rob, that you're making? So one of the things that you're doing is you're trying to assert that science, whichever one, and we're talking about evolution there specifically, can make some sort of claim about the supernatural. And that's a jump that cannot be made, unfortunately. So because the fundamentals of science is, and the very basic fundamental principle is, there are no non-natural explanations. That's the basic fundamental on science works. So that is the underlying assumption that every single explanation has to be a natural explanation. It precludes and excludes the supernatural. So any claim that is now made about a supernatural event within a chain of, say, natural occurrences, science will have no opinion on it. It cannot make an opinion on it. So when you try and then bring, let me just finish my point, Rob, and then we can carry on. So when you then try to make the assertion that science says this precludes the supernatural, basically it's almost like using an underwater hairdryer. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense, because those two things, the natural process of the process of science, which looks at only natural explanations for natural occurrences, cannot say anything about the supernatural. Imran, so I want to see how are you bridging this gap?
Yeah, Imran, you're misunderstanding. Imran, you're misunderstanding the position I'm having here. I am saying the following. Let me say it again. That if you guys all agree with Abbas that Adam and Eve were brought into existence by God and they do not have a common ancestor. In other words, there's nothing that came before them that eventually gave rise to what we call humans or Homo sapiens. If that's your view, and I presume you all have that view, and evolution, common descent, says that humans had a common ancestor and there was no point where there was like a human as we currently understand it. It gradually happens over time. Would you agree that those two positions are in conflict? They cannot both be, you can't reconcile that.
There is a conflict between the idea that we all came from like single cell organisms, that every species on the planet came from one being, and that includes the human, with the idea that Adam and Eve were a separate creation. Now, the thing is that can you show absolutely that that's the case? Just because there are similarities, that doesn't write off the fact that God could create us fully as we are, place us into Earth with similarities. Could an all-powerful being create something with similarities, even if it wasn't necessarily a part of that chain of change?
Apparently God can do anything that's logically possible. Agreed?
Right. So would it be possible for God, even if like we take for granted this idea that everything on Earth was created by God and that it did experience this form of change, and let's say we even grant that everything else on Earth has this common ancestor, and obviously I'm not accepting that necessarily, but for the sake of argument, let's do that. Is it possible for an all-powerful being, despite this common ancestor and every species coming from this, is it possible for an all-powerful being to create the human being in such a way that it still shares similarities with the other beings in the universe and then place it at a particular point in time? Is that possible?
Yeah, of course that's possible, but that is not
right. So it doesn't.
Hang on,
it's not.
Yusuf.
No, let me finish the point, and then you can say what you're going to say. So if it is possible for God to do that, then they're not mutually exclusive.
Yes, they are.
The
Let me
idea of
explain why.
evolution. Go on.
Because evolution says that something like Lucy was a common ancestor between human and chimps. Do you guys believe that Lucy gave rise to or was a common ancestor between humans and chimps?
Could you guys not
Can I
think
just-
we've moved on to Adam and Eve and stuff? But yesterday the
Really-
stream wasn't
really quickly.
even.
Can
the
I
stream
finish
was-
with Yusuf, please? Is that possible?
But the stream wasn't even about. You're sort of going on to off. We were reviewing yesterday's stream, and nothing was mentioned about Adam and Eve. You are imposing that. I mean, you said that Hamza can't assume the atheist position. You basically come on and almost make out that atheists were talking about.
Is this
I know
Jordan
where
speaking
you
now?
want to get onto. You want to get into the Islamic God because that all your work is
No,
based
I
on.
don't
that.
even need to get to this.
Yesterday we weren't even discussing any of that. So you're just kind of
Jordan,
bringing
Jordan,
up.
Jordan,
I
you're
don't
not
think it's
following.
that.
Jordan,
bad
you're
of
not
a thing
following
to-
along here. Let's just finish with Yusuf,
I'm
please.
following them perfectly.
Yusuf, do
Go
you
on.
agree that if evolution says that Lucy was our common ancestor, then that is in conflict with Islam, which says that Lucy was not our common ancestor, and in fact we just share some similarities, but God created humans, not Lucy bringing humans into existence.
So there's
Agreed?
an issue here. There's an issue here with this idea of categorization. So, for example, I admitted that it's necessary that there has been change from Adam and Eve up until the present moment. So, you know, you have to admit that to be able to admit that there's different races, like the people that live in Africa.
That's not what we're talking about, though. Yusuf,
No,
with
it
the
is. It
greatest
is.
of
It's
respect,
relevant.
That's not
It's
what we're
relevant.
talking about.
I can get
Rob,
to
let him
why
make
it
his
is.
point, please.
So,
But if he's making an irrelevant point, do we need to wait for an irrelevant point?
The problem that happens, Rob, is when you do this interruption in this sort of way, when the person's in a mid-sentence, it becomes us unnecessarily
Okay, no problem.
antagonistic.
I'll
We're
allow
trying
him to go on.
we're
No
trying to
problem.
come to an understanding, which is
understand that,
really
but-
the point.
But Imran, if somebody's off on the wrong track to begin with, do we allow the wrong track to go on, or
I
do
think
we
you're on the wrong
nip it in
track.
the bud
If you
straight
give
away?
the benefit of the doubt, I'm sure you'd find he's not on the
Because
wrong
he's
track.
equivocating between things that have that look like that we have some similarities with and common descent. That's not
no,
the same thing.
I've not even finished making my point. So I don't think you know where I'm going.
Go
with this
ahead,
yet.
Yusuf. Go ahead.
So even if we, and I'm not saying that Lucy is necessarily a descendant. I'm saying that if we do grant that, it doesn't even necessarily fall that Lucy wasn't an ancestor of, and I don't know much about Lucy, whoever this individual is, but if there are changes from Adam and Eve onwards, the issue here is imposing this idea of, we don't like referring to Adam and Eve and the people that came from him as not being human. So the issue here ends up being one of this modern idea of categorization and kind of imposing this idea of them being lesser beings, because we consider that disrespectful. That doesn't mean that Adam and Eve weren't different. So it doesn't mean that if you were to see Adam and Eve now, that they would look identical to the human beings that we have here. Because if it follows that there was enough change to go on to give rise to these different races, that every race has experienced a form of change from the original ancestor, from Adam alayhi salam and Eve.
Yeah, Yusuf, again.
So even if Lucy is, and I'm not granting that it is necessarily, but even if we were to say that Lucy is a common ancestor, it doesn't follow that we couldn't refer to Lucy as a human, because this is again a problem of categorization. We're moving on consensus. So the scientific community says we want to refer to these as Neanderthals or as whatever. That's an imposition from modern person looking at these things and saying, well, I can see that there's a characteristic distinction between certain features of this being and the modern human, but it doesn't follow from that they're necessarily a completely different species. It could still be human, just that it's experienced a different thing. So one is the issue of categorization, and that a lot of it's just imposed. And secondly, it doesn't follow from that even if we were related to Lucy, that Lucy wasn't related to Adam alayhi salam, and that Adam alayhi salam didn't have ancestors. So it's simple.
Is it okay if I say something real quick?
Yeah. So just to conclude, none of that conflicts. If you just
let Hatim say something.
Go on, Hatim.
Yeah, so I actually think this is related to T-Jump's epistemology, which I actually came here to discuss. But Rob, I suggest you get in touch with him and talk to him about this. But he's very big on underdetermination. So the idea that data could lead to various inferences that could equally explain the data. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's what Yusuf is doing, but it's it's comfortably accepted in the philosophy of science, and that's a large part of T-Jump's epistemology. And
Okay,
I think it's worth like talking about that.
I'm not here to defend T-Jumps. In fact, I don't agree with his objective morality. You guys just don't quite know how to critique it. He has been well critiqued. I would point you here. I'm on your side in a sense. I don't agree with his objective morality. He's been well critiqued by the philosopher Alex Malpass on that and various other atheists. So I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not here to defend his epistemology. What we are talking about is whether common descent can be compatible with a theistic view that Adam and Eve came into existence not from a common ancestor. And what Yusuf said didn't really address my point.
I feel like it did.
Yes, it can. I'll explain to you now. And it's the same limitation that I was talking about before, in that any scientific process is a process that only looks for natural explanations for any observation or phenomena that it comes across. Science itself cannot contemplate a supernatural cause for any event that might occur. So the lens that you're looking at the problem with is necessarily going to give you the conclusion that you have, that this is an incompatible thing. Now the problem here is that would you be able to, by using science, be able to detect a supernatural intervention in any way?
Yes.
No, you couldn't.
Yes, you can. Shall I give you an example?
Please.
Okay. So if it were the case that Jesus was resurrected and we had the ability to test that, that would be a supernatural claim that science can investigate. The cells recompile, and this dead person, in fact, resurrects after 3 days. That's an event that's happened. It's an extraordinary or perhaps supernatural event, and science can be brought to bear because it's happening in this world, and it violates the laws of physics.
No, absolutely not. So this is the problem, Rob. Let me explain to you why. So what you're saying is that you're asserting that we will have an ability to do something that we currently don't have the ability to do. And if we had this ability to do this thing, that this would allow us to look at something that science cannot look at fundamentally on a principle level. There is, even if you found that, yes, this cell regenerated after it was dead, let's say you had this ability to do this, the science has to find a natural explanation for this occurrence. It cannot, because it's within the principles of science, assert that this is a supernatural event. Why? Because what's the basis of science? That everything requires a natural explanation. You're stuck within this ballpark. You're stuck within this fence. You cannot get out of this. If you want to talk about the supernatural, you have to leave science behind, in the sense that it's not the tool to use to do this. The underwater hairdryer example is exactly relevant here. You can't use a hairdryer when you're under the water. And that's what you think
and then moves from that.
How do we establish a supernatural event happen in this universe if we do not use the scientific method?
The way that we've always established how supernatural events occur, when the scientific method wasn't even in existence.
How do you establish it?
How everything is established, mostly is established by testimony.
It's a testimony for a supernatural event.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll elaborate a bit further then.
No, you don't need to. Please, Imran, you don't need to elaborate. I understand the point. And Sean Carroll and other philosophers disagree with you. And in fact, in his book, The Big Picture, Sean Carroll specifically talks about this and says there's nothing in science that precludes us investigating quote unquote supernatural or extraordinary events. And he uses the example of people being, coming out of their graves supposedly when Jesus resurrected, and all these other zombies wandering around. Science can investigate that it's happening in this world. It violates the laws of physics, and we could at that point say, if we could test it, that the principle of science can still be used there and shown that, hey, this is a non-naturalistic event.
So
right, but then could you prove zombies didn't rise?
I didn't hear. So Hamza said something. I didn't hear what he said.
Oh, sorry. I said, could science prove zombies didn't rise? If it's a supernatural event?
Could it prove that they didn't rise?
No, because you've just done exactly what you've done. You've looked for a natural explanation for something. You've ignored the possibility of a supernatural.
I am saying, let me repeat it. I am saying that if a zombie or Jesus resurrected, the principle of science can be brought to bear, because what we would eventually be forced to admit is that it violates the laws of physics, and this is an extraordinary or supernatural claim. So the claim that science cannot investigate the supernatural, people like Sean Carroll and others disagree, and I'm in agreement with that.
I still don't understand. So how would you differentiate then? How would you know if it was supernatural or not?
Okay, I'll explain to you again. Because the natural processes is one of entropy, decay, right? And if it were the case that you could violate this law, then we could.
Yeah, but do you believe it happened though?
No other way that this could happen. Then we could legitimately say that, hey, this is an extraordinary or supernatural event. How could this possibly happen? In every
Rob, let me just
scenario.
come back to you on that, please. So the problem here is what you're doing is you use the word use the word actually when you're talking to Hamza is the word eventually. Now, what you mean by this is what I'm taking you to mean by this. Obviously, you could tell me that I'm misunderstanding you. Is that when you're doing the process of the science, and you see something that does not explain by your current level of knowledge, what you're going to do is you're going to look for explanations. And initially, your explanations are going to be the ones that are natural as far as you understand. Then you'll get to the stage where none of your theories that you currently hold as being good working models of how the universe works, when none of them apply to this, then the natural conclusions, okay, we have to adjust our theories before we can then come up with an answer to what is happening here. What you're not going to do is, as an initial step, okay, this is something we can't explain, it must be supernatural. Now, what you're asserting in your argumentation is this is something that's quite readily done. Now, there's been lots of instances. So even with, if you go to sort of quantum events where things are appearing and disappearing, there was never this straight away initial assertion this is a supernatural event. The idea even now is we need to understand how and why this is happening.
Yeah.
And the idea is still to look for a natural explanation to these things that look amazing, like this particular.
I agree, Imran. I agree with that. But what I'm saying in principle is that we can have a position, I've given you an example, where we exhaust it and we can observe in principle that the laws of physics have been violated, i.e. that something non-natural has occurred.
So then your position would be we would need to adjust our understanding of the science. You wouldn't go to supernatural. So science
it's not the first point.
The natural world with natural explanations, and the supernatural is definitionally outside of this. So I don't know. You're trying to combine the two together, and I think that's disingenuous. But I think we'll leave it at that.
Can I just ask Rob one last question, please? Rob, can I just ask you one last question?
Yeah,
if God exists, could he violate the very laws of physics?
Of course. And that's what we would call a supernatural event, right? And science could be brought to bear on that.
Right. But how would science, using the tools of observation and always asserting a material cause, non-supernatural, be able to come to the conclusion of it being supernatural?
Again, Abbas, I've just said to you, there are people like Sean Carroll and other philosophers that do not take that position.
I'm asking you, Rob. I'm asking you.
I'm in agreement with them, Abbas, that we could use the science, the principle properly construed, and if somebody could resurrect, or its arm regrew, it was prayed for, and somebody's arm regrew, and it happened, multiple times, we could legitimately say, here's a supernatural event. It's what's the most reasonable explanation.
Can I ask a question quickly, Imran, if you don't mind? Then you can do the counting. Do you believe Jesus rose from the dead, Rob? Rob, do you believe Jesus rose from the dead?
No, of course not.
Why not?
There's no good reasons to believe that.
Well, the people claimed it happened.
Yeah, so eyewitness testimony. Are you going to accept that for an extraordinary claim?
No, I'm asking you though.
I don't accept eyewitness testimony for any
why not?
Claim.
But so how would you differentiate between something being supernatural and natural? Then maybe it was supernatural.
Something that violates the laws of physics would be a good start.
So you've done exactly what we said you would do. You would go for the naturalistic explanation. Because obviously, rising from the dead does violate.
Which is on this. But Rob, we've had good time with you. It's been an enjoyable conversation. I'm just going to ask you one last question, please. And that question is a very straightforward one. And I'd like a yes or no answer, but I know that's unfair to ask for that. So the question is this: can science posit supernatural causes for observations?
What do you mean by supernatural causes?
Self-explanatory.
I think the question is self-explanatory. So can science posit supernatural causes for observations?
What is a supernatural cause, please? I don't know what that is.
Come on, Rob, please. We spent all this time talking about supernatural, and now you're asking me what supernatural is.
Yes. What is a supernatural cause?
Something that's outside of nature.
So it violates the laws of physics.
something that's outside of nature. So what do you answer my question if you can, please?
Yeah, but your question is poorly phrased. That's why I'm asking you for clarification.
So what do you think supernatural is?
Something that violates the laws of physics.
Okay, so can science posit something that is
Okay.
supernatural as
That's
a cause
where you're-
for an observation?
Imran, that's where the grammar of your question is incorrect. It doesn't posit that. It posits a natural explanation, and it can be brought to bear on something that is supernatural. So the grammar of your question is incorrectly phrased by my
So
lights.
thank you for answering the question, Rob. I really appreciate that. So
I wanted one last thing with you guys because we've gone off on tangents. But if you want to cut it short, that's fine.
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
no worries.
what I'd like to
Come
do,
on
Rob,
again. We'll have reviews of other streams we'll do.
Yeah, I want to do the objective morality with you because I thought that was in fact by far your weakest point. But if you don't want to
No problem.
deal with that
Come
with me
again,
now, that's
Rob.
fine.
We appreciate that.
But Rob, I invite you onto Hamza's Den in 2 weeks' time with Sabor and me and Imran.
Okay.
When we're going to do evolution in detail.
Well, evolution is okay. Hamza,
It'd be great to have you on to that
Let
stream.
me answer your question. Evolution is not my expertise. I'm happy to come on, Hamza, in even of that, and then with the condition that you and Sabur come and join us on the Gin and Tonic and defend Islam. How's that?
No, we're not. No, we're not going to do that.
Oh, you don't want to do that.
No.
You don't want to cut. You're allowed out of your safe space, Hamza. You're allowed out of this, and you can even bring Sabur with you to help you out. How's that?
No, we're not going to come on your
okay.
show.
Okay.
All the best, Rob. You take care. We'll
Take
speak
care, Rob.
soon.
Ta-da.
So I just
now
want
he's not an expert in evolution.
very briefly summarize this. So this is
Evolution, all of a sudden now he's not an expert. Come on.
This is fascinating. So what Rob actually said in his answer was that you'd bring science to bear and you would look for natural explanations until you ran out of natural explanations. And then he's saying, the positing is actually, then you could say there was something that beyond what we understand. But that's all you could say. You would have to readdress your theories. You'd have to, look at actually my theory of how this particular thing happens must be wrong because there's an observation I cannot explain. And you would adjust your theory. You really wouldn't actually go to a supernatural as an explanation because science, the basic fundamental of science is there are no non-natural explanations.
Yes,
Imran, can I just color very quickly? So for example, at the moment, quantum physics, if you look at quantum physics, it literally looks like magic. It does, right? Obviously, we're not saying it is magic, but we're just saying that, two particles on either side of the universe, 14.3 billion light years across. And if one is affected, the other one is immediately affected, okay? Now, obviously, science is trying to find out how a 14.3 billion light year distance is traversed instantaneously, okay? Or how particles appear from what appears to be nothing and disappear. Now, is science going to, say, after 10 years of investigation of quantum physics and there's no answers to these riddles, or let's say 100 years after there are no answers to this riddle, will science then suddenly concede, maybe, this might be supernatural? Or will science actually say, oh, we don't know, we're going to keep investigating? The reality is science is never going to arrive at a situation where it's going to posit, oh, you know what, we've hit a brick wall. It must be God that, this proves God. It must be God. Or this is supernatural. It's never going to happen. So this nonsense about, science will, somehow be able to discover the supernatural or accept the supernatural, it's never going to happen, clearly.
Yeah. Even if let's start with the assumption God does exist, a miracle has occurred, and a scientist or a group of scientists, we'll go for the resurrection example that we were speaking about, were there at the time looking at it. They could come up with other hypotheticals, even if it was a supernatural event. So they could say, oh, well, maybe there's some sort of alien species and they've injected him with some sort of next level serum we don't understand. And that's revitalizing his atoms or his cells and blah, 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 blah. That you can constantly put these hypotheticals on because of the human condition. You're burdened with ignorance in a lot of matters. You have a finite scope. You have a lack of complete information. We're not God. We're not all knowing. And science is basically like walking through fog and doing your best to kind of feel around the objects and explain what's going on while being impaired. And, it does a very good job at that task, at trying to explain things to the best of, the ability of a being with, the condition of being finite and ignorant in many things. but it's not offering absolute things in the sense that there isn't always that there is always hypotheticals that you can bring up which are a consequence of our being finite, the consequences of our limited capacities, and that there are always being blind spots. There's always these epistemological issues that we've got to constantly deal with, and if obviously you can take advantage of that, even if it is the case that it was a supernatural event, that the cause was God and all of this was to occur. The axioms, the presuppositions made in the scientific endeavor are pragmatic. They help get things done. And this is why I think Thomas Kuhn ends up talking about truth being kind of pragmatic. And you have to kind of move towards this in the philosophy of science because of the issue of our finitude, because of the issue of the problems that we have to face as humans.
Alhamdulillah. So
I thought it was quite funny though. Sorry, I was going to say, but I thought it was quite funny that the example that this guy that Rob's been reading about brings a Christian example, and it just supports what you're saying, Ben. That they're responding to Christian claims, the resurrection and all this. If you're in a room full of Muslims, you talk about resurrected Jesus. It's like, what?
So it reminded me of Speaker's Corner with when Sabor talked to him, because when he got to a certain point, he would just say philosopher names as if that's evidence. Yeah, so that philosopher said that. So there. So can you explain what that means?
Has only read a couple of books and not quite finished them. So he's quoting all these guys. We haven't read their books. He's just sort of read them.
If you could get
Whereas I believe Sabor read all their books.
Oh, is he the legend from the Sabor?
Just a quick one, actually. I was quite disappointed. So on my lunch break, I didn't have a lot of time today because I wanted to watch his stream, reviewing like Hamza's stream. And his, I honestly thought he would come on a different person, because in that stream he was really calm. It was stop spamming. That was all like laughing, taking the mick, and being quite like laddish. And I thought Rob would come on with some decorum and talk like he did in that stream.
To be fair,
I was really disappointed, to be honest. I'm only the host. I'm not, you know what I mean? I was just a bit of, it was a bit of a shame, really. I thought we were going to have a good discussion.
To be fair, it's very difficult because that's
you know what I mean?
But you know, also, I mean, if you look at, for example, Imran, you posed a very good question to Rob there about how would science explain a naturalistic process when in the middle an intervention of a supernatural event took place, and Yusuf established also that very same point, that how would you be able to disprove something that looks like it actually flows, for example, right? And he simply started going to Lucy. He didn't answer he didn't address the question at all. He didn't reply to what you said. Completely ignored, sidelined what you said.
Is this Lissa in the comment? Is this atheist?
Should we get Brother Hatim one, because he's been waiting for a while?
Yeah, let Hatim come in, actually.
No, it's fine. You guys can talk to Lissa. I was just here. I was trying to do like T-Jump's position a bit of justice. I've watched a lot of his videos, and I know a little bit about his epistemology. But you guys can talk about Lissa first if you want.
Is Lissa an atheist, though? Is Lissa an atheist?
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, well, answer that question. That's no.
Yeah. Thank you for this stream, brothers. And I just have like a comment on this subject. I just want to talk about the reference, because if we have like to justify or criticize any theory or argument or any idea, we need a reference to like to be a basic, that we start from. So like the example of Descartes, when he tried to doubt everything, and at the end he couldn't doubt his mind. So he has a reference. So that's why he said that I think, therefore I am. So thinking about saying about there's no God or there's no creator, we're gonna be in a situation without a reference to start with, if we're just gonna be our reference just gonna be doubt, then they were gonna go insane, because we're gonna doubt in anything. Or if it's science, the science is changeable. We can't like make it as a reference. It change every time. Like we have like a new theory or a new thing, you know. Also, if we say that our reference is nature, then even atheists talked about the beginning of life. Then if there is a beginning, there is an end. So nature is changeable too. It's not like a stable thing that we can start from. So yeah, that's what was my comment.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, sister.
I think the other thing here, and it's important, and I raised it with Rob, and Rob obviously didn't want to go down there, which is that before you even get to evolution, you need to first come to an understanding of how this universe came into existence in the first place. Because getting bogged down in evolution, and then Rob says he's not an expert on evolution, yet he's made that his main argument in order to disprove a creator. And I just think that's, I just think it's putting the cart before the horse, quite frankly, you know.
Yeah. So red pens.
What do you think, Hamza, that Rob meant when you said? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think he meant? 'Cause I've never heard an atheist. You said that your reasons were, I think you said, logical and irrational, and he said you're playing global.
He said logic is
I
global.
thought that was quite an interesting. Yeah, for an atheist, I've never heard. So what is next? I think, I don't know. I'd like to have heard him expand on that bit.
Yusuf is a good guy to answer. I mean, is
To be
logic alone?
fair, I think. I think what he meant was that like something could seem coherent, but still be wrong. Like for example, like I don't know, like flat Earth theory or something like that. It seems coherent, but it could still be wrong. I think that's what he meant by logical. But I'm just trying to be charitable here.
Yeah, no. Basically, in logic, you can have you've got a distinction between sound and valid. So an argument can be valid, but it doesn't follow that just because it's valid that it's true. In order for it to be true, it also has to be sound. So basically, like you can, if you make an argument, premise 1, premise 2, therefore the conclusion, if the premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows, which means that it's a valid argument. But that's based on the assumption that the premises are true, and it could still be logical based on those assumptions. The issue is well, are the premises true? And then once you've gone into that, you've not only confirmed the validity of the argument, i.e., its logical structure, but also the soundness of the argument. So I think that's what he was referring to. But I don't think. I don't know. Maybe it was a bit of a confusion in what you were saying.
Well, I use 3 words usually. I say logical, rational, reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think if your position is based upon those 3 terms, then there's no one can come and say that your position is a false position.
Yeah. So you believe your argument is sound because the premises you believe to be true, and so if they are true, based on whatever the reality is, then the conclusion necessarily follows. So you think your argument is valid, and you also think that it's sound. The difference, obviously, is that he might even agree that it's valid, and he might say that it's logical if these premises are true. But then he could argue against the truth of.
Yeah, of course, that's the whole point.
Yeah, but I think that's what he was alluding to. But I think that the problem with that, with Rob there, he sounded quite anxious, and it's completely normal, especially if you're like one person on a stream with how many of us are there here? 6, 7. So I think that maybe anxiety was playing a bit on that, and we were trying to all speak to him. We're not trying to intimidate him in doing that, but when someone said something interesting, I did it at some point. I was I felt compelled to try to squeeze in and get my point across. And you have to be sort of overly competitive with all the other people on the stream in order to get yourself in. But when you're alone, and you've come onto a stream like as the only atheist versus several theists, you can obviously be a bit anxious for one, and it can feel like people are ganging up on you. But I think it's usually just a misunderstanding of the fact that we're trying to compete with each other to be able to get our thoughts out when we hear something, because we're constantly worried that if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget, or the conversation is going to move on, and I'm not going to have been able to make this absolutely killer point. So I'm trying to like squeeze in, you're trying to squeeze in, and then it kind of gets a bit hectic there. And if you're on your own, it's very easy to perceive that as an attack.
That one thing I said though, you said that thing I said about a claim and a belief being separate, different things. A claim is obviously asserting something. A belief is just a statement of what I believe.
Yeah. Well, it sounded like you were thinking that he meant that this was some sort of force or something.
No. Basic. If I said to him, God exists.
Yeah.
Is that not a claim?
It is a claim. Yeah.
And if I say I believe God exists, is that a claim?
It's a belief claim, so it's still a claim.
But it's not a claim upon him, is it?
But it's not absolute knowledge, and it's not necessarily a claim upon him.
Yeah, I'm not asserting. I think the word is asserting it on him.
Oh, you're trying to force him to.
No, if I say God exists to somebody, that means I'm telling them as a fact God exists.
Yeah.
If I say I believe God exists, it's got nothing to do with them.
No, it doesn't. But there we do have, separate to that claim, like personally anyway, I have a desire for other people to become Muslim.
No, which is fine.
Yeah. So I think that's all he was alluding to. That like making that claim, it doesn't follow from that we're trying to force everyone to become. And unrelated to that claim, we do have this separate desire for people to seek truth. This is the whole point of dawah, is that we want to go out and get.
Agreed. But like I say, it's not an assertion, is it, of my belief?
No, if by assertion you mean like an attempt to force someone
to claim it's true.
You claim to believe it's true.
No, I believe it. That's what I'm saying here.
It's still you still.
So if an atheist says to me, for example, if an atheist says to me, I don't believe God exists, that's not him telling me God doesn't exist. That's just him telling me he doesn't believe God exists, which isn't an issue for me.
Yeah, and you can both hold.
But if he comes to me and says God doesn't exist, then he's asserting it upon me that I'm crazy for believing in a God.
Not necessarily. Like you can make that claim. So like, let's say
the atheist making that claim on me. If an atheist comes to me and says God doesn't exist,
if he makes an absolute claim, he's still, even if he says that he knows this and blah 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 blah. I would still put it on him, even though he's not using the words belief. But it's still a belief. Despite
the burden is upon him, though, isn't it?
Should we get a new guest on?
Let's get a new guest on.
Well, I just want to establish this thing. I'll put it to bed.
That makes sense.
So we got Preston from Speaker's Corner, I think it is.
Yes. Hello, gentlemen. Hello, Abbas. Hello, Imran. Pleasure to see you and hear from you.
Man.
And
welcome, Preston.
Jordan M, Hamza, and Yusuf. I won't take up too much of your time because I'm not a full-blooded atheist. As Abbas and Imran know, I've been on a journey trying to find the truth. And I just wanted to pose a question, which you guys might have already addressed in my strange experiences with debates with atheists. I've tried to find out their criteria for believing in things. So I asked them simple things like, you acknowledge that we have consciousness. You acknowledge that we have dreams. You cannot see consciousness. You cannot see dreams. What is the criteria that you utilized to believe in that human beings have dreams and that human beings have consciousness? Because you cannot see it. You cannot touch it.
Yeah.
Even if you put a human being under an MRI scan, you cannot see their dreams. The best thing you could do is probably see brain activity. But I can't see Hamza's dream. I can't see Abbas's dream or Imran's dream. I can't view Jordan's consciousness. Yet they believe that consciousness exists and that dreams exist. What is the criteria that the atheists are using to believe in that? Every time I ask them that question, they can never give me a straightforward answer because they suddenly feel the need to say, oh, well, the scientists have proven that dreams and consciousness exist. But I'm like, well, hold on a minute. When you were a teenager or when you were a young adult, you didn't need a scientist to tell you that you had consciousness. You didn't need a scientist to tell you that you could dream. So what was it that they used to believe in those things? And they never seem to want to give me a straight answer. They kind of think it's a trap. Maybe it is. I don't know. But
you know, the problem is, have you heard of the hard problem of consciousness?
No, I have not. No.
That's going to be the kind of revealing of where this issue lies. So it's the hard problem of consciousness is this issue of consciousness seems to escape being reduced to simply being material processes. And there's a massive issue trying to prove that. And it's basically because consciousness is quite a subjective experience. And so, like, for example, science can't tell us what it's like to be a bat, but we know that there are experiences of being a bat. Like you have bats, they're floating about there, they appear to be conscious, and they must be having experiences. Now you can if science were to take the bat and break it down into absolutely every possible way that science is able to, no matter what it tells you about its atomic structure, what it tells you about its patterns of behavior, any of that, it can never reveal to you what it's like to be a bat. And this kind of highlights the issue of how consciousness seems to elude the scientific process. So if I would really recommend, there's quite a lot to say about it, but there's probably some articles on Plato Stanford website. But if you just search hard problem of consciousness, there's a lot of really, really interesting things that go into it. And it does kind of open up into a few different avenues. And it's the reason they're probably getting uncomfortable is because of this problem. And science just is incapable of dealing with it. And so it goes from completely denying that the problem even exists, which as far as I can tell is just completely absurd, to all the way kind of moving towards this idea of panpsychism, or trying to claim that the whole universe is conscious and things like that. And there's a lot of varying responses to it. It's really interesting. And I think if that subject is something you want to look into, that you should definitely read more on the hard problem of consciousness. And you'll probably start to see where these issues arise and why people react the way they do when you're dealing with them and asking them questions.
Okay, and that was basically it. I will continue my journey. I'm still reading the Quran. I'm using tafsirs because it's not very easy to understand the Quran without tafsirs. But then I don't know if I'm looking at the right scholar for the tafsir. But
Neri, please leave us your email because we'd like to sort of obviously keep in touch if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I'm putting it in the private chat now.
Fantastic. So, thank you very
much. But as usual, it's a pleasure talking to you guys from EFDawah. And Hamza probably doesn't remember me, but I was the guy who kept on asking him why did he believe in the story of the cave? What led him to believe? And he then began to give various reasons. Because I wasn't trying to say the cave incident didn't happen. I was like, what convinced Hamza that it really happened?
What was my response at that time?
Oh, you were using some fantastic terms. You were calling, what was it you said Muhammad was? You said one of the terms was Muhammad was not the confessor, the truth. Muhammad was known as the
trusted God. Yeah.
That was the one. And then we all were saying, what does that mean? And then you were telling us.
Yeah, but the simple answer is very simple. Very simple indeed. Allah told us that's what happened.
Yeah, fair enough. I
can't get more detailed than that. That's it. Allah said it happened that way.
Yeah, that's fine. I understand belief.
It goes back to whether you believe the Quran is from Allah and whether you believe Muhammad is a messenger of Allah. See, this for me, rather than reading the Quran, I think you need to take a step back. I think you need to look at the question. First of all, you believe a creator exists. I'm assuming Allah exists.
Yes, I do not believe in randomness. I don't believe the universe came about random. I do believe something was responsible, but what it is, I don't know yet.
Fair enough. But do you believe that's all right? So do you believe that something would be the source of all knowledge and all guidance for its creation, if indeed it exists?
Yeah, that's what I choose to believe. I can't prove it, but
of course not. And so then obviously the next step is to be rational and reasonable, would be to connect to that source.
That would be, that I would say
right.
so.
And then the next question we would ask is, how would we do that? And then, because we believe this source is there and we want to connect, but how do we connect? And then we look in history and we see many, many men claiming to be messengers of this source. So at this point, we should get very, very excited. Would you not agree?
I try not to get too excited.
Well, we should get excited.
But then I think maybe I'm using emotion and not rationale, so I pull back.
Yeah. Fair enough. But then what happens at this point, Preston? If so, these men claim to be messengers of this cause. But what you have to do, like any messenger, is he a messenger for you? Yeah. So if you look at you look at Abraham, was his message for you? Well, apparently not. His message for his people, Moses' message for his people, Jesus' message was for his people. There's only one man in history, Preston, only one man in the whole of history who claimed to come for you, mate. Only one. And that was Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him.
I don't really dispute that, but you need to understand I'm coming from a Christian background, so part of my brain is still saying, hold on, Jesus. So
yeah, that's fine.
Step by step.
But I'm saying only one man in history has made that claim, and only one man in history has demonstrated that claim. So in the Quran, Allah says, "We sent you, Muhammad, as a mercy to mankind." This is the first claim. The second claim is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam called the people from Persia, from Egypt, from Byzantium to worship the one God. This is a demonstration that he was calling non-Arabs and non-Muslim to Islam. Yeah. So this is a kind of manifestation of that mission. Yeah.
I understand.
So all you need to do from this position now is to determine whether or not Muhammad, peace and blessing upon him, is telling the truth.
And this was where I reached exactly with Abbas and Imran. Everything else we agreed on, but it was the simple fact that I had problems believing that Muhammad had this metaphysical connection with a creator.
Fine. So, and what do you believe the options are then for Muhammad at this point?
I think he was a real guy and he did do amazing things, but that
let's just go back to the cave. Muhammad has come down from the cave and he's claiming that an angel has spoken with him and told him he's a messenger of God to the people. Yeah. What are the variables we can have at this point? I mean, for me, I find four. Either he's crazy delusional, he's been meditating too long, and he's having hallucinations and thinking angels are talking to him, or he's been deceived. This is a Christian claim. He's been deceived by a demon that's pretended to be an angel and told Muhammad he's a messenger of God, but in fact he's delivering a message from the devil, from Satan, yeah? Or he's lying. He created this whole religion for some whatever reason, yeah?
Whoa.
Or he's telling the truth, yeah? So
the thing that I look at, I don't believe he's a liar. I don't believe he was possessed by a demon, but I entertain the possibility that he could have been mistaken in his experience. I don't believe that. I'm still looking, but I'm just looking at the options. But like I said,
you are aware this experience was over 23 years, yeah?
You see, that's where I'm still doing the research. I didn't know it was 23 years. I just thought it was shorter than that. I thought it was a one moment experience. He then
no. This was the moment in the cave was the introduction, and then for 23 years he received revelation, which is the Quran. And we have to bear another thing in mind: he was illiterate. And so, because the Quran said, and the reason we know this, because the Quran says he was illiterate, he was unlettered, and if he was being able to read or write, the people around him would have said, "Whoa, wait a minute, we know you can read and write." So this is like a demonstration that he was illiterate. So the question that you need to ask yourself: how does an illiterate man in the 6th century come up with the Quran? And the people followed him, and Islam is what it is today, based upon which it can't be a mistake. It's either he's crazy, delusional, having hallucinations, but then you have to stretch that over 23 years, or the demon claim, this is from the Christians, yeah? And the problem that collapses because according to the New Testament, Jesus says Satan can't do this thing. Satan can't oppose himself. A house that is divided cannot stand. And if you read the Quran, you'll know that Satan is accursed. We're told to seek refuge from Satan. And the question that would also need to be asked, why would Satan send a man to pagan Arabs worshipping statues, abusing their daughters, abusing women, abusing animals, and tell them to stop all that and to worship the God of Abraham? Why would the devil do that?
I just wanted to ask, the 23 years, if I wanted to read up on it, is it in Hadith or is it in the Quran?
Obviously, it will be in the history, isn't it?
The history, so it'll be in Bukhari, or
it'll be from the moment he received revelation to the moment he died, and the testimony of his companions and the testimony of his wives as to the revelations and the experiences, what we went through when the revelations came down.
Okay, what I'll do then is I'll check in the Bukhari to read it to get a thorough understanding. Oh, what's that book you're holding?
This is what you want to read.
Exactly.
This is written by Martin Lings. It's the biography based. His life based on the earliest sources, and so this goes through everything from it starts with Abraham, and it goes on to explaining how the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ended up in Arabia, and then it kind of goes through basically each stage of his life, beginning from like his birth, going through to his first revelation, and then continuing on through all the way to his death. And it's a brilliant book. It's very well put together, and it was also written by a revert called Martin Lings.
Thanks very much. I've just found it on the internet. I'll even has an audio file, so you can just listen to it instead of reading.
Yeah, I've got the audio.
And I just want to leave you with one thing, Preston, just in case you realize that craziness is out of the window and deception by the demon is out of the window. Then all you're going to be left then is a lie or the truth. And that's when you have to look into whether or not Muhammad, peace be upon him, lied. And then we'd look at the motive for the lie, and would see what could he have to gain by creating this religion. And then we look at he was married to the richest woman in Mecca. We look at he had status in the city. We look at he was offered so much things to stop calling the people to worship this one God. He was then persecuted, and the people following persecuted and exiled in the desert. Now, if this is for a lie, we have to question what kind of motive is this. And then we look at when he was successful, when he did achieve triumph over Mecca, when they returned from Medina. He didn't live like a king. He didn't have palaces. He didn't have a gold. He was a simple man. So we have to question what's the motive, right? And then we can take it to another level. Let's just say he found some, I don't know, altruistic motive. He just wanted to stop all this debauchery going on around him. He wanted the people to stop abusing women and animals and people like that, and to treat their elders care. All the teachings of Islam, alhamdulillah. And so he had the motive. But then we have to ask ourselves, then, did he have the capacity? Because what you're saying, if Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the author of the Quran, which would be the claim if he's a liar, he would need to memorize the Old and New Testament, the oral traditions of the Jews, and the apocryphal books of the Christians. He would then have to rehash them in his brain, and then over piecemeal, over 23 years, regurgitate it, remembering he's illiterate. This is the claim. And the thing you have to add into that mix, the Arabian Old Testament, so the Old Testament in Arabic did not arrive 400 years after he died. So you could squeeze a motive somehow. But even when it comes to the capacity and the fulfillment of that lie, it's impossible. So my brother, Preston, surrender your will to the one who created you, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thanks very much for your time, guys. It's been a pleasure. And
good luck, Preston.
I know you're going into a corner then, so I back away.
Well, no, I don't mind talking even face to face when I speak with Abbas and Imran and yourself, even at Speaker's Corner. I don't have a problem. I'm just searching. And I don't rule out anything. And I'm glad you gave me that audio file. That book, Muhammad, by Martin Lings, that's definitely going to be, I hope, easier than the Quran itself.
So, but it's a bit less authentic. But if you just like to chillax for like an hour and a bit, watch the film The Message. It gives you a basic narrative of the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, and the early journey of Islam and how it kicked off.
Wait. The movie with Anthony Quinn playing the role.
That's the one.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of clips of it.
This is the superior one, though.
Yeah,
this is the beauty. So I really recommend that. But I wish you the best of luck on your journey. I wish you success, and may Allah guide you on the straight path.
Take care, guys.
Take care, Preston. Wish you all the best.
Peace.
I think the argument he presented from consciousness is, I think for me, is the strongest one. I've never heard any good argument against it.
No,
that's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah.
Right.
Subhanallah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a book by Thomas Nagel, Professor Thomas Nagel, which is Mind and the Cosmos. It's the one that we know when we did the Google Gary discussion about pantheism. That's the one that I was reading at the time. And he raises two things, because the title of the book talks about why our notion of Darwinian evolution is probably most definitely false. And he raises two things. So one thing he says is that the amount of diversity we see in nature is not explainable by the time that is alleged to have passed. So he talks about why that is, and he's not a theist; he's an atheist person. The second thing he says is that the theory itself, the Darwinian theory of evolution, doesn't account for something that's abundant everywhere, which is consciousness. So if your theory is not accounting for a major observation, then there's something in your theory that has to be deficient, or maybe your theory needs completely overhauling. And that's a very powerful point that he makes. And I think that, so this is why the argument from consciousness is really a powerful argument, because as Brother Yusuf was saying, it's not reducible to anything material. You can't do it at all. And there's lots of people who are trying. I mean, there's an anaesthetist who's trying to inject people with, because when you give people anesthetic, they don't remember that time that they've had. And he's trying to see what effects this is having on a level to see, are we taking away consciousness or not? And it's very difficult to establish that, because all you're seeing is, if you put someone into a sleep state, they can't remember what they did. But actually, are they actually losing consciousness? Are they not still dreaming or doing something else? Because we can dream and not remember it. So there's no way you're going to get to the bottom of this conundrum. It's not going to be something that you find.
I swear I had a dream when I had surgery. I don't know.
Probably did then.
Yeah, I was just like, I've never heard that before. That you just get cut off then. I didn't know that. Maybe I had a dream after that, and I was just asleep still.
I did this thing once. The guy I was having a surgery on my knee, and what they did was he said count backwards from 10. So in 10, 9, 8, and then for as far as I was aware, I was still counting, but actually I'd woken up. So my 6, 7, 8 and my 5, 6, 7 were after the procedure. I was still... it was so funny. He was laughing.
Wow,
that's brilliant.
That's crazy.
All right, should we let Red Pen on? He's not. No, isn't he? He's not an atheist.
He did. Yeah, you're right, man. How's it going, Red Pen?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
salam. Thank you, brother, for letting me here, and I would say Jazakallah Khair, and wish God to reward you. So I just have a quick comment about topic today, and especially I'm linking to what's also the topic yesterday, because the gentleman atheist mentioned the Newtonian physics. So in order, when he's talking about the Newtonian physics, he didn't address the fact that when we use the Newtonian physics, for instance, one of the physical Newtonian physics is the Darcy's law that describing the fluid flow in poor spaces. He didn't mention that we use some conditions, and we put a lot of restriction in order to address and simple the problem. Otherwise, we have to switch to a numerical analysis, and do some averaging to the other parameters. So when the gentleman today that you were discussing with him today, he keeps saying violating the law of physics. Well, the question is, what is the restriction in your law of physics? So they didn't mention that, because your law of physics has limitation in order to address. So there's something like, for example, if we say there's a compressible fluid or incompressible fluids, but you can combine those two and to understand what's going on in terms of, so there are always restrictions. There are always, a constant variable. There are always, you put things in a simple way to address. So when he's saying violate the law of physics, the question is, what is the limitation of your law of physics? Is it explaining what's going on in reality, or there's a limitation, or there's some approximation to that law? So that's my point, just to mention, since they are always using science as an argument to prove that God does not exist. And thank you. May Allah reward you all. Thank you.
Jazakallah Khair.
I mean,
see you later, bro. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Malik. How are you?
Walaikum assalam. How are you guys?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So, for everyone on the panel, Malik said that he's an ex-atheist.
MashaAllah.
Correct. And you guys all actually, well, except for Brother Jordan, he accepted Islam a little bit later after me. But yes, you guys all definitely, mashallah, had, may Allah reward you. Definitely had an influence on it. By the way, Brother Hamza, your video of the convinced Christian, challenging the convinced Christian, I actually watched that video just to get material on how to attack a Christian. I had no idea it would lead me down this path. We plan, Allah plans,
So you were an atheist at that time?
Yes.
Watching that video. Wow.
Subhanallah.
I actually was quite militant because I felt offended that somebody would lie to me. And I saw it as a grand lie. Actually, that's how it greatly relates to yesterday's stream, because that blew my mind. And I felt that I had to come on and talk about it.
Yeah. Are you a born Muslim, brother? Are you a born Muslim?
Yes, but I proclaimed it and had no idea why.
Re-revert, Jordan, mashallah.
Re-revert, we want to get people like this on the next stream.
Yeah, big up the re-revert.
Yeah.
I think we should do a stream on that. Invite people on like Malik.
I'd be happy to come. But regarding today's show and yesterday's show, by the way, if somebody wants a masterclass on how to effectively red herring something, Rob, they should watch Rob, what he did today. It was amazing. And I felt all we really had to do, because this was supposed to be a review of last stream, starting with TJ and his answers. If we just brought it back to, let's play Richard Dawkins' video and ask Rob, hey, where did Rob make the distinction between a deist model of God and a theist model of God?
That was the point I was trying to make. I agree 100%.
So I think that that would be crucial. I think that would be a very good ending for this when you put it on, YouTube world, play Dawkins' video, overlay Rob's voice, and just write down that question of, show me where Dawkins, in the Ahmed Didat style, show me where Dawkins made that distinction. So just going off of yesterday, because I loved that stream, because I was convinced by the same fallacious argument that TJ made. So let me just go down the list real quick, because I took notes. Number one, if TJ is watching, brother TJ, lies of omission exist. Okay, there's two kinds of lies. Lies of commission, when you are willfully giving false information, and lies of omission, when you are omitting information that you know. That is what Richard Dawkins admitted and confessed in front of everybody. That's how I moved into it. That's why I was so anti-theist. That's why I felt like I was lied to. So that's connecting my story to exactly that. My second point. One thing that I was, even as an atheist, I was very, very uncomfortable with looking into this, the rebranding and double meaning of words. Okay? What is a fact? What is a theory? When we speak in the academic sense, what is a fact is very different from the common knowledge of the people. And in intellectual discussions, atheists specifically never, ever, ever make that distinction. And that's another lie of omission. So fact in common language is an undisputable truth that cannot be up for review. For example, I have the charger for when I drop it, it falls. It falls. It did it again. That's a fact. Why it falls is the theory. So for TJ to say that evolution is a proven theory is fallacious. He's using double meanings. So there's my point on that. Now, Darwinism, okay? I held Darwinism the way people hold scripture. And when I actually looked into the philosophy of science, the paradigms under which we inspect the evidence, I had to let it go, just on logical basis before accepting a creator. Here's why. Darwinism is pseudoscience because it can never be tested and it can never be proven false. Here's why. 2 reasons. Reason number 1, how it's framed. Okay, it is random mutations and natural selection as a filtration system. You can never, ever, ever prove random. Random is just a code word for the ignorance of people. That's it.
100%.
If I flip a coin, I have a 50-50% chance of predicting what it would land on. But that's because of my ignorance of the factors. If I knew every single thing about that coin flip, the speed at which it's flipped, the height at which it went, what the temperature is, what the weight difference between the head size and the tail size is, what the wind direction is, if I know every single factor, 100% of the times I will predict how it will land. This is why Darwinian model is false. And I accepted the Lamarckian model way before I accepted a creator. So the difference, I'll tell you, the Lamarckian model is very similar, but it changes something so that you could actually test it. So whereas Darwinism actually just says mutation of the gaps, right? Random mutation of the gaps. Lamarckian evolution actually gives an agent of the mutation. So under Lamarckian model, what I do creates mutations, okay? And those acquired characteristics can be passed on. So like, for example, if I'm,
you're talking about, yeah?
Pardon?
Epigenetics you're talking about.
Yes. So if I smoke and I drink, it mutates my inside, it creates problems or benefits that I can pass on to the next generation. We have a mechanism, a testable mechanism for where mutations come from. Not mutations of the gaps, mutations of behavior. What causes the mutation, right? So if my environment changes, I decide, you know what, I don't want to drink anymore. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to take good care of myself. I'm going to eat right. Those acquired characteristics that I got will be passed on in some fashion. So this is just the Darwinian science. Darwinian model is pseudoscience because it's completely unfalsifiable. And there is an idea of, oh, well, what disproves Darwinian model is if you find a bunny rabbit with a T-Rex, right? People have used that a lot. I say, hell no. Okay, all you would do is go to the tree of life and you would just rearrange the branches such that bunnies evolved during the time of the T-Rex.
You adapt your theory, yeah.
It's a religion. Yeah. It's a religion, okay? Because no matter what evidence, because of the randomness factor, no matter what evidence you find against it, they will spin it and twist it and make it so that it was true all along. The last point I want to make,
before you do, you mind if I just touch on that what you were saying? Sure. So this links to again the problem of the human condition. So we often talk, or not we, but people can often talk about scientists as if they're some sort of superior class of people. You know, they go, no, the scientist follows the objective principles and blah 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 blah, as if they are completely removed from any subjectivity. But this isn't true. Like, scientists are human. You know, if they've, and you see the consequences of this when you have certain people that have dedicated their entire lives to a particular theory. If it turns out that their whole life has been wasted on a false principle, their subjectivity creeps in very quickly. The human being doesn't want to feel, because this again links into this idea of having a meaningful life. And if every ounce of your life has been put into proving a particular theory, which in the end is proved wrong, you see the resistance there. Because if it turns out that their whole life was wasted on something that was false, that renders their life, or that they experience their life as being completely without purpose or meaningless. I just wasted all that
I
time.
went through that twice.
Yeah.
I went through that twice.
It's even worse for the
back
elderly.
into Islam.
Yeah, it's even worse for the elderly, those who have spent like 50 years, half a century, just like powering into a particular theory, only to then have some young whippersnapper come around who's some genius. There was that film about Stephen Hawkins, and you see an example of that occur when he comes forward and he's giving his examples at the front, and there's a number of them. They get up and they strop and they get off, and no one reacts as if that's strange. Why? Because it's common to find this within the scientific community, where people are just stuck in their ways. They're stuck in particular dogmas, and it's because of the subjectivity. Oh, there's an echo. That people experience that is inseparable from the human being. You can't become this sort of strictly objective Ubermensch. You do have desires, you do have feelings, you can be swayed by particular things. The scientist has to deal with these things. They can't remove themselves from it. As much as they might like claim, or name their channel things like rationality rules, and so on and so forth. As they're always subject to these things. And obviously, I'm not saying that rationality rules doesn't claim to be free from subjective feelings, but it's the name is very telling of this kind of the zeitgeist of the scientific world, or those who kind of have science as one of the highest values. You have these issues that are inseparable from it. I thought it was a really great point, and it definitely.
And that actually leads very well into the last point I made. I wanted to make regarding TJ and his ideas on on morality, and I remember a conversation as an atheist I had with another atheist regarding morality. There is no such thing as morality when you're an atheist. I mean, just think about it for a second. The best you could do is utilitarianism. Okay? X has Y consequence, and I prefer Y consequence as opposed to Z consequence based on my whims and desires. That's it. That's all you could do. And I actually was asked this question, or actually I rather ask this of myself. And I think it's embarrassing to admit it, but I think it'll be very beneficial for others. If I believe in atheism, and I truly believe that there's no rational reason to accept the existence of a creator, and I also believe that Darwinism is a proven fact, why should I not rape? Like I had to ask this question. And really, the only again, if we take emotion out of it, the only logical reason I can ever have not to rape is that I could get caught. But that's it. Logically, under that model of there is no God and Darwinian evolution, it's logical for me to rape to the degree that it helps me pass on my genes, and to the degree that I desire, overlaid with to the degree that I could get away with it.
There's also issues of compassion. So like, if say for example you have
argument from emotion. Argument from emotion.
No, but it's
right? You're
not
asking me to have empathy, and I'm talking only logic.
Yeah, no, but the thing is I'm not talking about in terms of proving a morality, but someone might have the desire, someone might have, the belief in Darwinism and procreating and all that stuff, and they might still believe morality doesn't exist, but there could still be an argument that you could posit that says, well, I'm going to feel guilt if I do push through this, but this only applies to the person who would feel guilt. This doesn't apply to psychopaths who don't experience that. So there is a portion of the populace that might commit the crime, feel shame, guilt, even if they weren't caught, And then like, I think Dostoevsky writes about like a murderer who goes through the similar process of thinking through these things. And then he rationalizes it, and he's like, no, this person's evil. Why not do it to them? Kills them. It's a perfect murder, gets away with it. But he then has to suffer through the guilt. And he can't escape that, even though no one else knows. Like, he's got to live with himself now, and the act itself changed him, and he's got to go through that. But that only applies to people that deal with this, that have a conscience or that feel compassion despite doing something to someone that they would even consider evil. But you've got to allow for the fact that there are psychopaths, and if they don't experience that, then you're not really offering them very much to not do something if it is guaranteed that they can get away with it. Have we lost Malik?
No, I think he's still there. But like, give an example. If you watch a Mad Max movie,
I'm with you. And like, here's the thing: as like from my previous paradigm and belief system, here's how I would answer you. Your feeling of guilt is irrational. It is not logical.
Yeah, but then the whole point is that from a nihilistic perspective, who cares about rationality? Why would you need to be rational? So that, but this is the point. It goes both ways. So you can move in towards like a psychopathic sort of response to all of this, and someone says, no, but it's illogical, and blah, blah, and let's just assume that it is, for the sake of argument. Even if it is logical, from a nihilistic perspective, it's like, who cares? Who cares? Why should I be logical? I'm going to be a psychopath murderer, do what I want. But then it also applies to the one who feels compassion. So he might go, but reason and logic, but the person might not care. It's like, no, well, I'm a nihilist in terms of like, I'm an epistemological nihilist. I don't even trust my rational capacities, but I still have to deal with compassion. I still have to deal with the guilt, and I don't want to experience that. So regardless of whether or not you think it's logical, I'm not going to do it because I don't care about reason and logic. That option is always open as well.
Well, here's the thing, specifically talking about atheists. Atheists will pride themselves on being rational and logical. So
not all of them. Yeah. The very vocal ones that we deal with in polemics generally do. But I think the people that aren't as who don't hold reason and logic and rationality to a high degree, I think it's probably also within their nature not to get involved in polemics, because polemics kind of presupposes the whole idea of reason, rationality, logic. So what you'll find is if you're engaging in polemics, you're going to be most likely dealing with atheists that do hold that to a high degree, and the atheists that don't are just not going to be that motivated or interested in engaging in the polemics. They're going to be off living a hedonistic lifestyle and doing what they feel nice is, blah blah blah.
So guys, typical. Sorry to interrupt. Just an admin reminder. I think we're going to have to end it in about 10 minutes roughly, because then it'll be a 3-hour mark. Some of us have got work in the morning. But yeah, just a little reminder. We've got about 10 minutes left, inshallah. Okay. Inshallah. Sorry to interrupt, Yusuf. I just have to get.
No, sorry. I finished my point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to thank you guys for letting me on. And just to kind of give you my history and my view on very similar beliefs that I used to hold to TJ, except for the morality part, with the hawk being evil for eating a rabbit. That came out of, I have no idea where he pulled that out of. I don't know how that
pulled a rabbit out of a hat.
Poor rabbit.
Pull the rabbit out of the claws of an eagle.
But Malik,
leave your email with us.
To hear more of your story, mate.
I'd love to hear his story, Malik's story.
Yeah, leave your email with us, brother Hatim, in the private chat, Malik, and we'll make contact, inshallah, because I think it would be good to hear more of your journey, because I think it's a common journey in today's world. A lot of Muslims, born into Muslim families who haven't have a good foundation in why they believe what they believe, probably go through something similar to you. So it'd be good to hear that, inshallah.
Yeah,
and I think really, I don't, because we've got a couple of minutes, that really starts for me, is I became very fearful of religious people and the mosque, because when I was a little child, back in the old country, it's not only in the mosque, it was also in the schools. They used to hit children for not doing well academically.
I had exactly the same experience as you, brother.
And the mosque was not very different. So when you're a child, you hold God and those things at a higher standard than people, and you falsely equate those things, and then you see kids being beaten. And I became very, very fearful of a mosque. And I'll tell you, I'm 36 years old right now. I have children of my own. And when I go to the mosque, even today, okay, I still have memories. Like those memories come back.
Yeah, they're sick, don't they?
Sounds
So
similar to your story,
no way.
and we've completely gone away, from the Sunnah in this matter. On kindness to children.
Absolutely.
And those who don't have the capacity to understand.
I mean,
things.
for me, to the extent, brother, that I actually haven't sent my children to the mosque. They all taught online.
Yeah.
Because I found that for me, the experience so off-putting that I didn't want to put my kids through that because I knew it would affect their imam.
It's such a shame.
So all of my children are taught online, and we have to change the way that the mosques deal with it. And I think most of it is changing, mashallah. There's much more friendly now, but it's a big effect on the people around the world when the masjids are not places of love and compassion.
May Allah guide the ummah and purify our mosques and make them open.
Ameen.
I think Malik made a really good point at his first point. I do think, the point I made, I think Rob, because I felt like you guys had a really good stream where you purposely didn't mention Islam, because if you'd have brought in Islam into it, it'd have been a lot easier for you, I think. You purposely left it out, whereas all Rob's arguments always lead towards, even the evolution, he kind of said, well, atheists all are talking about Adam and Eve. I don't think atheists all say that, but it sort of suited what he had next. And most of his stuff is all pretty much Islam stuff. So he wanted to bring Allah into it, whereas I don't feel that's what the stream was about. Is it yesterday or day before? So I think he kind of led us down a bit of a garden path on a couple of points.
To be honest,
that's why I said that was a red herring masterclass.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you guys are experienced debaters, and he pulled that off. I mean, like watching that was like watching, Mitchell Stark bowl 95-mile-an-hour Yorkers at people. It was so.
Well, I don't want to defend Rob, but I did allow the premise that if it's true.
Yeah. So personally, unpopular opinion, maybe. Like I didn't think it was that much off. Like it. If it was a tangent, it was a relevant one, because the point was more to do with, all right, fair enough, atheism isn't necessarily something that follows from evolution. But then he wanted to hone in on the claim that if your religion says that Adam and Eve were created independently, and then it's proved absolutely that there was no human that was created independently, and that we all have a common ancestor with this single-celled organism. These two ideas are incompatible, which is fair. My criticism of that was that you can't show that absolutely, that there is no way of saying, because even if there are similarities and you're making all these inferences, an all-powerful God could still create a human being, with these similarities in an instant, without it having to have gone through the process of evolution. I don't think it was too much of an irrelevant tangent, because it does follow from this idea of whether or not evolution is incompatible with the Abrahamic God. So not just Allah, but the God of the Christians, or the God of the Jews, who believe Adam and Eve were created independently. What I was basically honing in on was that you can't show that absolutely. So even if these are incompatible, that's presuming that you can show it, without doubt. And you can't do that. Science is limited in terms of its reach. And no matter how many inferences you make, the possibility that God created Adam and Eve, even with these similarities, is always present. You cannot get rid of that. So you can make all the connections you want, but it doesn't matter in the end.
On that, I think there's a circular nature of Rob's argument on that, where, see, it's evolution is all based on the assumption of homology, okay? Because there are similarities, there is common descent, And to the degree that there are similarities, there is common descent. So, and then they say, well, look, there is similarities, so therefore there must have been common descent.
Yeah, but that doesn't follow.
No matter what you do, it's a circular argument.
So it's like
which is
there's a similarity,
unfalsifiable, like randomness.
Yeah, there's a good counterexample to that. So you can have a look at, say, the evolution, quote unquote, of mobile phones, and you can say, well, there's a similarity between the iPhone and the Samsung, whatever. I'm not a Samsung guy, but whatever model is the latest one, and you can say, well, because there is these similarities between them. Obviously, this is a massive oversimplification, but it gets the point across. That therefore they must have a common ancestor. But it doesn't necessarily follow from the fact that there are similarities that they do. They don't procreate, for one. But even if they did, there could have been separate things. There could also be this God that can create things that do develop over time and still place something fully formed in the middle of that. So, in the case of the human being, we would consider the human being a miraculous creation. Despite whether or not evolution can be proved, despite whether or not you could even prove that every other creature does share a common ancestor, none of this takes away from the Abrahamic claim that the human being could have still have been created miraculously, fully formed, even with similarities.
There are counterexamples as well. So you can look at, for example, echolocation in dolphins and echolocation in bats. If you look at the actual structures of what's causing the echolocation mechanism, they're very similar, but actually they're not linked at all in terms of a common ancestor.
Yeah, so they could have started developing
independent
separately.
Development of things without having a common ancestor. And there's lots of examples like this. So this is a counterexample to the idea of homology in the first place. So great point, brothers. Jazakallah Khair, Brother Malik, for coming. We appreciate your time. And please leave your details with us, brother. We'll get in contact.
Yeah. Jazakallah Khair, bro.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
May Allah bless you.
Just as a last point, the fact that we're all carbon-based life forms and it appears that there's common descent actually goes further to prove monotheism. Because had there been more than one...
Well, there's no time, mate.
Alex, sorry, I had to mute you there, bro. We haven't got time, bro. Sorry, you can't.
That was a big open as well. That wasn't something that you could just.
Yeah.
It's not on a small point at the end.
Sure thing. Thank you for letting me on.
Bless you, bro.
Take care,
May Allah bless you. May Allah keep you guided on the straight path.
Pop your email or something in the private chat, inshallah.
Pick up the reverts.
Reverts.
Saying revert with a stutter.
Can I just make a caveat? So I didn't mean to say.
No caveats.
I don't mean to say that we don't attend the masjid. It's just that the teaching that my kids have is at home, online. Obviously, we go to the masjid and pray, and it's a nice place and everything. But it definitely was my experiences that I had that made me decide this is the way to go. And I think things have changed because obviously, I went there 30 years ago, etc., 40 years ago, maybe. But that was a terrifying experience. So, alhamdulillah, may Allah make it easy and guide you, inshallah, as Brother Yusuf was saying.
Ameen. Right, listen, we got this comment. Yusuf, just give a 2-minute response. You can do it. You can do it.
Right, let me get my notes on.
What was that time?
You can do it.
So the Euthyphro is somewhat put forward by Plato. He has a discussion between Socrates and a guy called Euthyphro. I can never pronounce that properly. And they're basically getting into a conversation about what the nature of good is or what makes something good. And Socrates asks the question, is it good because God wills it? Or he says the gods because they were polytheistic, but it applies the same whether it's gods or God. Is it good because God wills it? Or does God will it because it's good? And this is put forward as a dilemma because what they say is that it's a dichotomy. You can only have one of the answers. But they also say that there are problems that follow from the answers that you give, whether or not you choose that one or the other. Now, I have an issue with this because they would say that if you say that God, it's good because God said it, they then, if you say yes, that's the case, they then try to say, well, then morality is arbitrary. And they say that it's random or based on a whim. Now, I have an issue with that as an inference from saying yes to the first one. One, because it doesn't follow that it's arbitrary. Because God says something, it's not based on random choice, and it's not something like a personal whim. Like a personal whim, when we're talking about that, you think of a human being sitting around thinking, I don't know, that one, I'll go for that one. And it's a very anthropomorphic view of God. And with regards to the second one, as well, because they kind of link, and I think you can say yes to both of them. So I see it as a false dichotomy. I don't think that you can make it out to be the case that you have to pick one or the other, and I don't agree with the inferences. So I would say, well, they would say, sorry, if you pick the second one, that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala picks or wills something because it is good. They then try to infer that this implies that there is an objective morality that exists independent from God, and that God is subject to it. I would say that that is false, because even if you say that God wills something because it is good, we would say that God, that would be contained within God's knowledge. It's not independent of God. God's knowledge is a pre-eternal attribute of the divine essence. And so any reasons that are made in terms of a justification for something being good are contained within the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not separate from him, and they're not this, ontologically separate entity that are acting upon God or limiting God. They're within God's essence. So he's not reaching to something beyond himself. This is coming from him still. And it doesn't make it arbitrary. And also, when we're talking about morality, we're talking about a relationship between beings. Now, God creates everything, and it's only through this creation that you can start to talk about these relations. So even if you were to talk about, that it follows from blah, 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 that this is good because of that reason. The only way that these reasons were even able to manifest was because God created everything in the first place. So he created all of the component parts which make one thing lead to another. So even then, God is still responsible for that morality. It doesn't follow that it's arbitrary, because it can follow from his knowledge, his wisdom, which isn't a separate entity from God. It's not independent from him, but it's contained within his divine essence.
Yeah.
And so,
I think it's just a penny drop moment on this, actually, because you've got to remember who's saying this. These are the Greeks. These believed in Zeus and this and that. Yeah. I think what they're basically saying is, if you're saying God says it's good, so you do it, they're actually saying man then can create his own laws of God by just saying, yeah, God says this is good. So that's the arbitrary nature. So if someone claims to be speaking on behalf of God, they can do anything they like as good.
Yeah.
I think we have to. We're looking at it from our theistic mono God, basically, yeah, from monotheism, where the clue is in the actual claim, the gods.
Yeah,
and you know what I mean. So, and it's just dropped for me. I get it now. I get it.
It also explains why, if this kind of example stemmed from a polytheistic society, why that a lot of the issues generally imply an anthropomorphism, or generally apply, that morality is being some sort of separate entity from the creator, which is, I think, a false move to make. But it's also interesting as well, because one of the problems with polytheism is that there is always a massive diversity in the way that the gods act. And this is something Socrates, funnily enough, also, I may mention this in the essay that I'm doing for Sapiens Institute. Imran will be aware of it because he's read it. That there's an issue that if the gods act in very contrary ways, so you've got examples of gods stealing, raping, doing very problematic behaviors. If the gods are a basis for morality, because this, for the ancient Greeks especially, that's what the epic tales were about. That people did draw their morality from these poems, from these stories about their gods. And Socrates recognized that this was an issue, because then anything can be justified. And so he even promoted to basically censor the religion of the polytheists, to prevent them from saying unjust things about God. And he even kind of, he often talked and reasoned towards a sort of monotheism, despite also sometimes using polytheistic language. So it was very interesting, and he kind of he really points out this problem with polytheism, and it's not just something that was present with the Greeks.
Right, 2 minutes are up, mate. 2 minutes are up, mate. Next time.
Same problem with the.
Jazakallah Khair, bro. That's really, really profound.
We can do a stream on this, bro. Honestly, this is.
I think we should. Stream. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's nice to go out of the Christian streams. It's a bit of different material, challenging other beliefs and explaining ours a little bit. So, mashallah, that's awesome.
Thanks for
putting me on. One string to our bow, isn't it?
We can
do a stream with Christians. We got a stream with atheists, man. Alhamdulillah, we have the truth. Whatever you can, we can deal with your isms.
Please click on this link below. This is Yusuf's channel, mashallah. It's really good.
Also,
really good. Next level.
Everyone here has got a channel now, haven't they? Independently.
Oh yeah.
So start subscribing to all of them.
I think I've been to it.
They made a channel as well. So
if you don't know my channel, there we go. Hey,
I think Imran's channel's older than me. That's fine.
I think everything about it.
I thought you were all making a new move to making your own channel, so I just assumed.
No. It's just our personal blogs, so to speak. I would say.
Just to offer that personal touch, because we've all got our styles.
Abbas's is new, though, isn't it?
What's that?
Abbas's channel is a new one, isn't it?
Conversation Islam.
Yeah.
So it's really about try to sort of getting the arguments out in different styles, so that people that want to sort of have different ways of looking at the arguments, they can see them, because sometimes the arguments get long streams. And inshallah, it's going to be allowing people, when they're searching for things, lots of different hits that they can go to find the answers. So the idea is that overall we're going to increase the presence, inshallah, of responses to things that people are searching about, and I think it will benefit everyone, inshallah. And obviously EFDawah, it will remain the EFDawah, inshallah. We'll always be here, inshallah.
People incline to different personalities, don't they? So sometimes you might say the same thing 10 times, but something's much more absorbable, but from one particular character for one kind of person.
Yeah, some people like the classiness and the calmness of Abbas. Some people want the.
Some people like the gladiator of the Hamza.
Some people like. Some people like the cooking programs.
They love watching me eat. They keep asking me, why are you not eating anything?
I was the best cook. I was the best cook out of everyone, I think.
I think
Is that it?
All right, guys. Shall we say salam to everyone?
Salam.
Assalamu alaikum.